Detectives are trained to face the worst humans have to offer: killers, con artists, and the darkness in people's hearts. But sometimes of the darkness isna human. Across the United States, law enforcement officers and private detectives have been called to investigate strange phenomena that defy explanation. Voices in empty rooms, shadows that move independently, objects shifting on their own, apparitions visible to multiple witnesses. Tonight, we delve into 25 real paranormal cases investigated by American detectives, where logic meets the impossible and the brave confront the unexplainable. These are stories where crime scenes are haunted not by suspects, but by spirits. The New Orleans Voodoo House in Louisiana is a place steeped in history. Once a vibrant shop where practitioners of voodoo conducted rituals and sold charms. Now stands abandoned, its weathered FAA Section A and darkened windows, concealing a legacy that has drawn the attention of both thrill seekers and investigators. Detectives were called to the site after a series of violent disturbances alarmed nearby residents. Witnesses reported objects floating in midair, shadowy figures darting across rooms, and whispers in languages that no one present could understand. Surveillance cameras captured orbs of light moving through walls, while officers documented sudden cold spots and objects shifting of their own accord. Upon entering the voodoo house, investigators immediately sensed a presence that was both oppressive and intangible. The air felt thick, heavy with a strange energy that seemed to cling to skin and clothing. A sudden drop in temperature accompanied every step deeper into the building, leaving guests and law enforcement alike shivering despite warm Louisiana nights. The walls, once painted in bright colors and adorned with ritualistic symbols, now seemed to pulse faintly, as if responding to the observers themselves. Many reported the sensation of being watched, a feeling that intensified in the upstairs rooms and the back areas where rituals were said to have been most frequently performed. The floating objects were among the most startling phenomena. Books, chairs, and even small ritual tools were seen rising into the air without contact, hovering briefly before falling to the floor. Detectives on site watched as a small wooden statue lifted several feet off a shelf, spinning slowly before clattering down. Witnesses described a mixture of fear and awe, noting that the movement seemed deliberate, almost intentional, as if the spirits or energy within the house were trying to communicate, intimidate, or reenact past actions. The unpredictability of the objects' movements added to the tense atmosphere, making every room feel alive and threatening. Shadowy figures were reported throughout the house, often appearing at the edge of vision before vanishing when directly observed. These figures were dark, indistinct, and sometimes humanoid, sometimes more abstract in form. Witnesses described them standing silently in corners, moving quickly along hallways, or appearing near ritual spaces where candles and ceremonial items had once been laid out. The shadows seemed to avoid light, almost as if they were bound to the dim corners of the building. Yet their presence was unmistakable. Many who saw them reported a sense of dread, as though the figures carried memories of past ceremonies, conflicts, and energies that had not yet moved on. Whispers in unknown languages heightened the eerie experience. Voices seemed to drift from room to room, often coming from areas that were otherwise empty. The sounds were not faint but carried a tone of urgency and intent, as if the spirits were speaking to one another, to the living, or perhaps trying to enact messages that no one could comprehend. Detectives noted that the whispers often coincided with other phenomena. A sudden cold spot would appear, an object would shift, or a shadow would pass quickly across a wall. The combination of auditory, visual, and physical manifestations made the house feel like a nexus of concentrated supernatural activity. Surveillance footage added further evidence that the voodoo house was more than an ordinary abandoned building. Orbs of light were caught moving through walls, floating above the floor, and interacting with the environment in ways that could not be explained by conventional means. Cameras positioned in multiple locations recorded the orbs appearing in succession, suggesting a coordinated pattern, rather than random anomalies. Officers monitoring the feeds noted that some orbs seemed to follow investigators as they moved through the halls, adding to the impression that the house was alive, aware, and possibly even sentient in its behavior. Cold spots were reported in nearly every room, sometimes localized to corners or hallways, other times spreading across entire spaces. Investigators documented temperature drops that occurred in the absence of drafts or ventilation issues, often coinciding with the appearance of objects moving or the presence of shadowy forms. Witnesses reported goosebumps, sudden shivers, and a feeling of pressure in the chest or on the shoulders, as if the energy within the house was physically interacting with those present. These chilling experiences left even the most experienced paranormal professionals unsettled, reinforcing the Mansion-esque reputation as a focal point of supernatural activity. The New Orleans Voodoo House has become a site of fascination and fear for locals and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Its history, combined with ongoing reports of floating objects, shadow figures, and mysterious voices, creates an environment where the past refuses to remain buried. The Mansion-esque walls seem to hold memories of rituals, incantations, and energies long ago invoked, replaying them for those who dare enter. Each visit becomes a confrontation with the unknown, an experience where the boundary between living and spirit blurs. Despite its dangerous and unsettling reputation, the Voodoo House continues. The Voodoo House continues to draw investigators and thrill seekers, all eager to witness its phenomena firsthand. Guests leave with more than memories of decayed woodwork or faded cymbosa. They carry the lingering impression of unseen presences, whispering voices, and objects that defy explanation. The house stands as a reminder that some places retain the energy of the past, and that history, magic, and tragedy can combine to create a haunting that persists long after the living have left. The New Orleans Voodoo House remains a nexus of unexplained activity, where shadowy figures pace halls, objects float without cause, and whispers in unknown languages drift through empty rooms, and cold spots chill the air, cameras capture inexplicable orbs, and detectives leave with the unsettling realization that the house remembers, reacts, and continues to exert its influence. It is a place where the living and the supernatural intersect, ensuring that anyone who enters will feel the weight, the presence, and the mystery of the unseen forces that dwell within its walls. The Elm Street apartment in Chicago, Illinois, has long been regarded as an ordinary residential building by day, with its brick exterior and modest architecture blending seamlessly into the surrounding cityscape. Yet those who have spent time within its walls at night speak of experiences that are anything but ordinary. The apartment gained notoriety after a tenant reported disturbing phenomena: voices arguing late into the night, objects flying across rooms, and apparitions of children playing in hallways and living spaces. Local authorities were called in after repeated complaints, only to encounter a scene that defied explanation. Detectives found footprints that led nowhere, doors opening and closing without wind or human contact. A cold, oppressive presence that seemed to saturate the entire building, leaving a lasting sense of dread. Visitors to the Elm Street apartment often describe a tangible shift in atmosphere the moment they enter. The air feels heavier, thick with an invisible energy that presses on the chest and clings to the skin. Many report a sudden chill, even during the warmer months, and a sensation of being watched that intensifies with every step taken to the narrow corridors. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the walls, and the creaking of floors takes on an almost deliberate rhythm, as if the building itself is aware of each person moving within it. Voices arguing late at night are one of the most frequently reported experiences. Tenants and investigators alike have described hearing heated disputes echoing through hallways and apartments, though no one is visible. The voices sometimes speak in recognizable tones, shouting familiar words, and at other times arguments are in whispers, unintelligible yet filled with emotion. The sounds appear to originate from multiple locations simultaneously, often fading and reappearing in ways that make it impossible to pinpoint their source. Witnesses often feel a heightened sense of urgency or fear during these occurrences, as the energy behind the voices is active and reactive. Objects moving on their own is another hallmark of the Elm Street apartment's hauntings. Books, chairs, and small personal items have been observed shifting positions, falling, or even flying across rooms without any physical cause. One tenant reported a chair lifting off the floor before slamming back down against the wall, while another described a lamp spinning on a table as if pushed by an invisible hand. Detectives on the scene documented these phenomena, noting that no environmental factors, such as drafts or vibrations, could account for the movements. The unpredictability and apparent intent behind these incidents create an unnerving feeling that the building itself is alive, responding to the presence of the living. Apparitions of children playing are perhaps the most unsettling reports. Witnesses describe shadowy figures darting through hallways, sometimes laughing or running, only to vanish when approached. The figures often appear translucent, small in stature, and eerily detailed in motion, as if caught between this world and another. Some tenants have reported seeing these figures interacting with objects, such as tossing a ball or opening a door, only for the items to move again moments later when the children disappear. These appearances evoke both sadness and fear, a haunting reminder of lives once present yet now forever out of reach. Footprints that led nowhere were discovered by detectives investigating the apartment. Imprints in dust, carpeting, and even hardwood floors appeared suddenly and vanished at intervals, leading to no exits or entrances. Some followed walls and corners, disappearing mid-step, as if the entity creating them could move through solid surfaces. The footprints were found in patterns suggesting intent, tracing paths that seemed almost like a silent warning or message. They contributed to a mounting sense of the apartment as a space governed by forces beyond normal perception, a place where conventional rules no longer applied. Doors opening and closing without cause intensified the eerie environment. Tenants and detectives reported doors swinging open slowly and shutting with surprising force, with no wind, no one nearby, and no visible mechanism to explain the movement. In some instances, doors would reopen after being closed, sometimes repeatedly, adding to a feeling of intrusion and unpredictability. The combination of sound, movement, and shadow created an immersive experience in which the building seemed to exert control over those inside, manipulating perception and provoking fear. Cold, oppressive energy permeates the Elm Street apartment, enveloping all who enter. The sensation is more than a simple chill. It is a weight, pressing on the shoulders, tightening the chest, and filling rooms with a palpable unease. Many report difficulty staying in certain areas for long periods, as if the energy actively discourages presence. This oppressive quality often coincides with other phenomena, such as voices, moving objects, or apparitions. This leaves visitors shaken even after leaving the building. Despite its unsettling history, the Elm Street apartment continues to attract attention from paranormal enthusiasts, researchers, and the curious alike. Its combination of historical presence, unexplained phenomena, and active haunting creates an environment where the past feels vividly alive. Guests leave not only with memories of cramped hallways and modest furnishings, but also with lingering impressions of voices, ghostly children, floating objects, and footprints that disappear without trace. The Elm Street apartment stands as a testament to the persistence of unseen forces, where voices argue, doors swing, objects fly, and children play long after they should have vanished. The cold, oppressive energy leaves an indelible mark on all who enter, a reminder that the boundaries between the living and the spectral are fragile and permeable. Here, the past is never truly gone, and the unseen continues to watch, play, and interact with those daring enough to step across the threshold. The Boston Tunnel in Massachusetts is an unassuming stretch of underground railway, part of the city's expansive subway system, yet has gained notoriety for a series of unexplained accidents and eerie occurrences that have baffled both workers and authorities. Over the years, reports have emerged of figures disappearing into shadows, disembodied voices echoing through empty corridors, and footsteps that continue long after anyone has passed. Detectives were called in after multiple incidents raised concerns of safety and supernatural involvement, only to encounter phenomena that defied conventional explanation. Night vision cameras recorded dark silhouettes moving along the walls. Workers described hearing voices and footsteps in areas confirmed to be empty, and a sense of cold, oppressive energy seemed to saturate the tunnels. leaving all who enter with an unsettling impression that the underground passages were anything but inert. Workers and maintenance personnel were often the first to encounter the strange occurrences. Many reported hearing footsteps echoing from tunnels that were supposed to be deserted. The sound of someone walking in the darkness, deliberate and measured, would follow them as they navigated the labyrinthine passageways, only to vanish when they attempted to trace its source. Others recounted voices speaking in tones that were simultaneously urgent and unintelligible, coming from directions that changed unexpectedly and offering no clear words. Some workers claimed that the voices seemed to whisper warnings or repeat phrases from earlier conversations, as if the tunnel itself was replaying snippets of history. The most unsettling reports involved shadowy figures that appeared along the tunnel walls. Detectives and surveillance teams observed these shapes on night vision cameras, sometimes moving deliberately along the tracks, other times appearing to float or shift unnaturally. Silhouettes lacked clear features, presenting as dark, vaguely human forms that vanished when approached. Workers who ventured close reported feeling a presence beside them, a weight in the air or a chill that seemed to follow them through the corridors. Many described the sensation as being watched, as if the shadows were conscious observers of their movements. Investigators documented a series of unexplained accidents that seemed to coincide with paranormal activity. Electrical equipment failed without explanation, small tools moved from their original positions, and sudden drops in temperature were recorded in areas far from ventilation or cold air sources. Some maintenance crews spoke of tripping over objects that were later found to have moved, doors slamming shut unexpectedly, and lights flickering in patterns that could not be explained by electrical malfunctions. The combination of physical disturbances, visual anomalies, and auditory phenomena created an environment where both logic and instinct seemed to conflict, leaving detectives and workers on edge. Night vision cameras and surveillance equipment became key tools in documenting the phenomena. Dark silhouettes were repeatedly captured on video, moving along the tunnel walls or crossing tracks in ways that defied human timing and speed. In some instances, the figures appeared to pause and watch the camera itself, or to follow the movements of investigators as they proceeded through the tunnels. Other times, orbs of light were observed moving through the darkness, sometimes hovering briefly before vanishing or passing through walls and barriers. The recordings left investigators puzzled, as the anomalies persisted across multiple devices and locations, ruling out equipment malfunction as a likely explanation. Cold, oppressive energy was another common feature reported by those entering the tunnels. Personnel spoke of sudden drops in temperature that were concentrated in specific areas, often coinciding with sightings of shadowy figures or the hearing of unexplained voices. The cold carried a weight, pressing on the shoulders and chest, and many described a tightening in the stomach or a sense of unease. That grew with every step. The sensation was sometimes accompanied by dizziness, or a shiver that ran along the spine, or a sense of being followed by something unseen. Even seasoned detectives and subway workers, accustomed to long hours underground, found themselves unnerved by the intensity of the atmosphere. The labyrinthine nature of the Boston Tunnel seemed to amplify every phenomenon. Its narrow corridors, echoes, and low light created a perfect environment for auditory and visual anomalies to appear magnified. Steps sounded louder, shadows stretched further, and whispers seemed to originate from impossible angles. Investigators noted that the activity often concentrated around areas of historical significance, where earlier construction accidents or previous incidents had occurred. Some speculated that the tunnel had become a repository for residual energy, where past events replayed themselves in loops that the living could sense but never fully understand. Despite the dangers and unexplained events, the Boston Tunnel continues to operate, though cautionary measures have been increased for workers and inspectors. Paranormal enthusiasts and investigators have attempted to study the area, drawn by the mysterious activity and the repeated documentation of figures, voices, and cold spots. Those who leave the tunnel often report a lingering sense of being observed, the memory of fleeting shadows, and a haunting awareness that the underground passage is more than a mere conduit for trains. The Boston Tunnel case remains a striking example of unexplained phenomena intersecting with daily life. Shadowy figures pace the walls. Voices echo from empty corridors. And footsteps follow even when no one is present. Cold spots chill the air. Objects shift inexplicably. And night vision cameras capture shapes that vanish when approached. The tunnels serve as a reminder that some places, even hidden beneath the city streets, retain the imprint of past events. For those who enter the Boston Tunnel, leaving a lingering sense of mystery, the Phoenix Motel in Arizona sits on a desolate stretch of highway, its neon sign flickering against the desert night. On the surface, it appears like any other roadside accommodation of weathered walls, modest rooms, and a parking lot lined with dusty carsa. But beneath its mundane exterior lies a history steeped in mystery and fear. The motel gained notoriety after a string of unexplained disappearances drew the attention of law enforcement, prompting a private detective to investigate. Witnesses spoke of figures appearing in rooms where no one was staying, mirrors reflecting the images of guests long gone, and doors locking and unlocking themselves without explanation. The motel became a place where the ordinary and the supernatural collided, leaving visitors and investigators alike unsettled by the forces that seemed to inhabit the property. From the moment one steps onto the Phoenix Motel grounds, a strange sense of unease is palpable. The desert air carries a dry chill at night, and the long, shadowed corridors of the motel amplify every sound. The hum of an air conditioner, the creak of a door, or the soft scuff of footsteps. Guests report feeling watched even when alone, a prickling awareness that unseen eyes are tracking their movements. The motel-esque layout, with narrow hallways and dimly lit rooms, seems designed to amplify the senses, creating an environment where the ordinary becomes unfamiliar and every shadow is suspect. Figures appearing in empty rooms were among the first phenomena reported by tenants and motel staff. Guests would enter rooms they had booked, only to find signs of occupancy of beds slightly rumpled, lights on, or belongings scattered despite having been assured the rooms were vacant. Some reported seeing shapes moving just beyond their vision. Dark, humanoid silhouettes that disappear when directly observed. Witnesses often describe these figures as stationary at first, appearing in doorways or corners, before drifting silently across the room. The effect was unsettling, creating a feeling that the motel itself was populated by unseen residents who were replaying moments of the past or asserting their presence to those who dared enter. Mirrors within the Phoenix Motel are frequently implicated in the hauntings. Guests have reported seeing fleeting images of previous occupants. These apparitions are often visible only in the reflections, vanishing when the viewer turns away or tries to approach them. In some cases, the reflections mirror actions that have not yet occurred, such as a door opening or a person walking past, only to align with reality moments later. The mirrors seem to serve as windows into the past, holding glimpses of lives that intersect with the Bodinga-esque mysterious energy. Doors locking and unlocking on their own add a layer of menace to the Motella-esque supernatural reputation. Guests and investigators alike have described attempts to enter rooms only to find the doors sealed, then suddenly swinging open without a sound. Conversely, rooms that were vacated sometimes became locked inexplicably, trapping keys inside. This phenomenon occurs without wind, electrical interference, or any other physical explanation. The unpredictability of the doors, coupled with the movement of objects and appearances of shadowy figures, creates a sense that the motel is not simply a structure, but an active participant in the events unfolding within it. The private detective called to investigate the string of missing persons encountered an environment that tested the limits of rational explanation. Footsteps echoed in empty corridors. Whispers seemed to originate from nowhere, and faint outlines of people were observed moving past the rooms, only to vanish when approached. The detective noted that the disappearances coincided with the most active areas of the motella, the rooms along the west wing, where the Bodinga's oldest construction remained intact. Some rooms seemed to concentrate energy, producing intense chills, sudden drafts, and fleeting apparitions that disappeared before any photographic or video evidence could capture them. Witnesses often report an oppressive feeling in the motel, a sensation of heavy air that seems to press on the chest and shoulders. This energy appears strongest in the rooms where supernatural activity is concentrated, particularly those where previous guests disappeared or were rumored to have met misfortune. The oppressive presence leaves guests uneasy, and even seasoned investigators have described a lingering sense of being followed, touched, or silently observed. Some claim that the energy seems to interact with those inside, responding to movement or presence, creating a dynamic and unpredictable haunting that is both immersive and unnerving. Objects moving independently are another consistent feature of the Phoenix Motel-esque reported activity. Chairs, lamps, and small personal items have been observed shifting position, tilting, or falling without cause. Occasionally, items seem to move with intention, appearing to point toward specific rooms or highlight areas of significance. Combined with doors that lock and unlock, mirrors reflecting figures of old guests, and figures appearing in vacant rooms, these phenomena create a layered experience where every step, every sound, and every shadow feels charged with unseen influence. Despidia, or perhaps because of its eerie reputation, the Phoenix Motel continues to attract curious visitors, paranormal enthusiasts, and investigators. The building's history, combined with documented disappearances and repeated sightings of unexplained activity, makes it a place where the ordinary and supernatural collide in unnerving ways. Guests leave not only with memories of cracked walls, faded wallpaper, and desert winds, but also with the lingering impressions of figures in empty rooms, and reflections in mirrors that do not belong to them, and doors that seem to act with a will of their own. The Phoenix Motel in Arizona stands as a testament to the persistence of unexplained phenomena. The oppressive presence within the building leaves an indelible mark on all who enter, a reminder that some places hold more than memories. They hold the energy of those who have come before, continuing to interact with the living. For anyone who steps across its threshold, the Phoenix Motel is not simply a lodging place. It is a crossroads between the known and the unseen, a space where the past continues to manifest in mysterious and unsettling ways. The Detroit warehouse in Michigan is an imposing structure, a relic of the city's industrial past. With its weathered brick walls, expansive loading docks, and vast interior spaces once filled with machinery and inventory. By day, it appears abandoned and lifeless, a monument to a bygone era of manufacturing and commerce. Yet recent events have revealed that the warehouse is anything but empty. Detectives investigating repeated break-ins were confronted with a series of inexplicable phenomena. Objects moving on their own, shadows passing through walls captured on security footage, and a chilling presence that seemed to observe every move of those inside. The warehouse, with its cavernous rooms and darkened corners, has become a hotspot for paranormal activity, leaving law enforcement and witnesses alike unsettled and perplexed. From the first moments inside, visitors and officers alike report a shift in atmosphere. The air feels heavy, charged with an intangible energy that presses down on the shoulders and seems to cling to the skin. A cold draft may sweep through a room with no ventilation, and footsteps echo unnaturally across the empty floors, amplifying the sense of isolation and tension. Even experienced detectives accustomed to crime scenes describe a growing unease, as if the warehouse itself is aware of their presence and silently observing. The sensation of being watched is pervasive, often concentrated in shadow corners, stairwells, and long corridors where light barely reaches. Objects moving on their own are among the most frequently reported occurrences. During investigations, desks, boxes, and small tools were observed shifting position without any human intervention. Chairs were seen rocking slowly, and filing cabinets opened and closed in ways that defied logic. In some instances, items would topple to the floor, yet no one was nearby to disturb them. Detectives and security personnel noted that the movement often appeared deliberate, as though the objects were being manipulated by an unseen hand, sometimes guiding attention toward specific areas of the warehouse or signaling the presence of an invisible entity. The unpredictability and intensity of the activity left officers tense, often pausing to assess their surroundings before continuing their work. Security cameras capture phenomena that further confirm the haunting nature of the site. Shadows of figures were recorded moving along walls, walking across hallways, and vanishing into solid structures with no discernible point of entry or exit. The footage revealed forms that were dark and indistinct, humanoid in appearance but lacking clear features. Some of the figures seemed to watch the camera or follow investigators as they moved through the warehouse. These images, repeated across multiple cameras and nights, suggested that the phenomena were not mere optical illusions, but consistent occurrences with a pattern that hinted at intelligence and awareness. The chilling presence in the warehouse is palpable to all who enter. Officers reported feeling a weight in the air, a pressure that seemed to follow them from room to room. The sensation is often accompanied by shivers, goosebumps, and a sense of being scrutinized. Some described a subtle tug at their clothing or the feeling of invisible eyes tracking their movements. This oppressive energy seems concentrated in specific areas, particularly where prior disturbances have occurred or where security cameras capture unusual activity. The combination of visual, auditory, and physical anomalies creates a layered experience that is difficult to reconcile with the Warehouse's abandoned appearance. Footsteps are another commonly reported phenomenon. Detectives frequently hear the sound of boots or shoes pacing the floor above or behind them, even when no one is present. These phantom steps often coincide with other phenomena, such as objects moving or shadows passing through walls, amplifying the sense that the warehouse is alive with unseen activity. Investigators describe an increasing tension as the sounds grow louder and more persistent the deeper they move into the building. In addition to movement and shadows, some officers have reported hearing faint whispers or unintelligible murmurs coming from empty corners or distant rooms. The voices appear to have directionality, drifting from wall to wall, sometimes seeming to mimic phrases spoken earlier in the investigation. Though they cannot be clearly understood, the whispers add to the sense that the warehouse contains memory, history, and possibly residual energy that has not yet dissipated. The sounds are rarely constant, but recur in ways that make the presence almost tangible, leaving witnesses questioning the boundary between natural and supernatural causes. The Detroit warehouse, despite its abandoned appearance, functions as a stage for repeated paranormal activity. Objects move independently, shadows appear and disappear, footsteps echo through empty corridors, and whispers carry through vast, unlit rooms. The building itself seems to retain the energy of past events, replaying them in ways that are observable to the living. Detectives and workers leave with more than memories of cracked concrete floors, rusted metal, or empty loading bisa. They carry the lingering sense of being watched, of unseen figures moving just out of sight, and of an energy that refuses to dissipate. The warehouse stands as a testament to the persistence of the unexplained. Shadows glide along walls, objects shift without cause, and a chilling presence permeates the air, watching and waiting. Footsteps echo through corridors, whispers fill empty rooms, and security footage capture phenomena that defy rational explanation. The presence of unseen forces becomes increasingly palpable as the atmosphere thickens with an unspeakable malevolence. Detectives and workers leave with more than memories of cracked concrete floors, rusted metal, or empty loading bisa. They carry the lingering sense of being watched, of unseen figures moving just out of sight, and of an energy that refuses to dissipate. The Detroit warehouse is more than a relic of industrial historia. It is a living reminder that some spaces retain the imprint of unseen forces, leaving anyone who enters to confront a world where the ordinary and the paranormal collide, and where every step, glance, and sound carries the weight of the unexplained. The Atlanta Manor in Georgia is an imposing historic mansion, its grand FAA Section Ade and sprawling grounds reflecting the wealth and prestige of its original owners. Built in the 19th century, the manor has long been admired for its architectural elegance, intricate woodwork, and ornate chandeliers, yet beneath its grandeur lies a reputation steeped in mystery and the unexplained. A detective team was called after multiple sightings of figures roaming the halls, voices echoing from empty rooms, unexplained footsteps, and doors slamming shut with no one present. What began as isolated reports quickly escalated into a full-scale investigation, revealing phenomena that defied conventional explanation and left officers both intrigued and unnerved. From the moment investigators entered the Atlanta Manor, the atmosphere felt charged with invisible energy. The air seemed heavier than outside, carrying a subtle weight that pressed on the shoulders and clung to the skin. Long corridors and high ceilings amplified every creak and whisper, turning ordinary sounds into unnerving signals. Detectives noted a palpable sensation of being observed, a feeling that intensified as they ventured deeper into the house. Even officers accustomed to tense and unpredictable environments described an almost tangible tension, a silent presence that seemed to follow their movements from room to room. Ghostly figures were reported throughout the mansion. Witnesses described seeing humanoid shapes lingering near doorways, moving silently through hallways, or standing still in rooms for long stretches before vanishing without a trace. One officer documented a figure that appeared to vanish directly through a wall, leaving a chilling impression of a presence that could defy physical boundaries. These apparitions often appeared faint, shadowy, and indistinct, yet their movement suggested awareness, as though they were observing the detectives or retracing familiar paths from another time. Officers and staff consistently heard the sound of shoes pacing corridors, ascending staircases, or crossing floors, even in areas confirmed to be empty. The steps were deliberate and rhythmic, echoing through rooms and creating a sensation that something or something was following them. In several instances, the footsteps would pause or change direction suddenly, as if responding to the movement of investigators. The persistent presence of phantom footsteps heightened the tension, reinforcing the notion that the manor was actively inhabited by unseen entities. Doors that were left open would suddenly swing closed with force, only to reopen moments later. No drafts, mechanical malfunctions, or human intervention could account for movement. Some officers reported doors closing repeatedly in a short span of time, creating a startling and disorienting effect. Combined with the shadows, footsteps, and voices, the doors became a conduit for the menorah's strange energy, a reminder that the building itself seemed responsive to the presence of visitors. Voices were another key feature of the haunting. Investigators reported hearing murmurs, whispered conversations, and occasional clear phrases coming from rooms that were completely empty. The voices varied in tone, sometimes urgent, sometimes plaintive, and often seemed to originate from different directions simultaneously. At times, they echoed across the high ceilings and long corridors, making it impossible to pinpoint a source. Detectives noted that these auditory phenomena often coincided with other manifestations of footsteps, moving shadows, or slamming doorsa, creating a multi-sensory experience that made the haunting feel active and interactive. The layout of the Atlanta Manor appears to amplify these experiences. Its long hallways, multiple staircases, and expansive rooms provide spaces for shadows to linger, footsteps to echo, and sounds to carry unnaturally. Dark corners and dimly lit areas often house the most activity, with officers reporting stronger sensations of being watched or followed in these locations. Some rooms seem to concentrate energy more intensely, producing sudden drops in temperature, subtle movement of objects, and heightened auditory phenomena. Detectives also observed objects moving independently. Small items such as books, chairs, or decorative pieces would shift positions, tilt, or fall without explanation. The mansione's architecture, designed to impress and awe, inadvertently magnifies the sense of the unseen within its walls. Occasionally, these movements seem deliberate, directing attention toward particular areas or aligning with other paranormal manifestations. Officers noted that these events occurred more frequently in spaces associated with the house's historical significance, suggesting a connection between the energy and the mansione's past occupants. The Atlanta Manor continues to be a site of fascination and apprehension. Its blend of history, architectural elegance, and unexplained phenomena draws visitors, investigators, and thrill seekers alike. They carry the lingering impression of ghostly figures, footsteps that follow them, doors that act independently, and voices that echo from empty rooms. That lingers long after leaving. That some buildings retain the imprint of their past. Footsteps echo through empty corridors, and voices carry from nowhere. Shadows move with awareness, objects shift independently, and a chilling presence saturates the air. For those who enter, the mansion is not simply a historical structure. It is a living repository of memory, energy, and the unexplained, where the past continues to interact with the present, and the boundary between the seen and unseen remains perilously thin. The San Francisco hillside in California is known for its sweeping views of the city and the Pacific beyond. Yet beneath the natural beauty lies a history of unexplained phenomena that has drawn both curiosity and fear. Reports began to circulate of a shadowy figure appearing on the hilltop at night, prompting local authorities and detectives to investigate. Witnesses describe the entity as tall, indistinct, and silent, often standing motionless for hours as if observing the city below. When approached, the figure would vanish without a trace, leaving only the chill of night air and the lingering unease of those who had encountered it. Surveillance cameras and amateur recordings confirmed some of these sightings, capturing faint orbs of light and ghostly silhouettes moving along the slope, further fueling speculation that the hillside was home to a presence beyond explanation. Residents living near the hillside were among the first to notice unusual activity. Many reported seeing a dark figure appearing at dusk or late at night, silhouetted against the city lights. The entity did not move quickly. Instead, it seemed to stand and watch, unmoving for long periods. Its form was often described as human-like, but lacking distinct features, shrouded in shadow. Some witnesses claimed that even from a distance, the figure seemed to exude a palpable sense of awareness, as though it was aware of being watched in return. The mere presence of the figure evoked feelings of tension, apprehension, and a sense that the natural world was intersecting with something unseen and unknowable. Detectives investigating the area noted that sightings were often accompanied by subtle anomalies in the environment. Animals, such as birds and small mammals, appeared to avoid certain areas of the hillside at night, while the wind seemed to behave unpredictably, shifting suddenly and chilling the air. Officers reported feeling a presence that pressed against them physically, a heavy weight on their shoulders and chest. Even when no one else was nearby, some described a sensation of being observed from all directions, a pervasive awareness that intensified as they climbed the slopes or approached the locations where sightings had been reported. Cameras set up to document the activity yielded striking results. Footage captured faint orbs of light drifting along the hillside, sometimes moving erratically, other times hovering in place before fading into darkness. Shadowy silhouettes appeared in multiple frames, often along paths where no individuals were present, disappearing when approached or when light was shown directly in their direction. Some recordings showed the figure shifting in ways that seemed impossible for a human being, moving across the slope without leaving footprints or interacting with the terrain. These images, though subtle and fleeting, were enough to convince investigators that something unusual was taking place. Witnesses often noted that the figure seemed to appear at specific times, typically late at night when visibility was low. The sightings were never accompanied by sound. The entity was entirely silent, and attempts to communicate or approach it were met with sudden disappearance. The predictability of its appearance combined with its elusiveness created an eerie pattern, leading some to speculate that the hillside itself was acting as a stage for residual energy, or that the figure was bound to a past event that had imprinted itself on the landscape. The experience of approaching the figure was described as deeply unsettling. Those who attempted to walk up the hill toward it reported a sudden drop in temperature, chills that ran through the body, and the sensation of heavy air pressing around them. Some felt their hearts race or experienced an instinctive urge to turn back, even when no rational danger was present. Objects carried along the hill city, or rocks, leaves, or equipmenta, sometimes moved unexpectedly, as though the figurea's presence influenced the physical world. These manifestations, though subtle, reinforced the sense that the entity was not only observing but actively interacting with its surroundings in ways beyond ordinary perception. Local lore surrounding the San Francisco hillside suggests that it has long been a place of significance, though much of the history is fragmented. Some believe the figure represents a spirit tied to past events, a guardian of the land, or a remnant of a tragedy that occurred long ago. Others suggest it may be a residual haunting, an imprint of emotion and presence left behind that occasionally manifests in the physical world. Regardless of the explanation, those who witness the figure report a lasting impression, a memory that lingers and evokes both awe and unease. The combination of environmental anomalies, visual sightings, and camera documentation has made the San Francisco hillside a site of ongoing interest, for both investigators and curious onlookers. Witnesses leave with more than memories of the slopes or the distant city lights. They carry the lingering impression of an unseen observer, the ghostly orbs and silhouettes captured on film, and the sense that the hillside is more than a simple geographic feature. The presence there is subtle yet undeniable, a reminder that some spaces retain traces of the past or entities that exist just beyond the reach of normal perception. The San Francisco hillside continues to be a place where shadowy figures linger, orbs drift silently, and ghostly silhouettes cross the slopes in the night. Detectives, witnesses, and amateur researchers all report the same pattern. The entity appears, watches, and disappears, leaving only an oppressive chill and a sense of the unseen. For those who venture there, the hillside is not merely a scenic overlooka. It is a space where the ordinary and the supernatural intersect, where the boundary between the living and the ethereal is fragile, and where the past continues to reach into the present in ways that defy explanation. The Houston abandoned factory in Texas stands as a rusted relic of the city's industrial past, its massive steel framework and decayed machinery casting long shadows over cracked concrete floors. By day, it appears lifeless, a monument to forgotten labor and abandoned production lines. Yet those who enter after dark speak of a presence that is anything but inert. Private investigators were called in after a series of reports describing unexplained activity. Apparitions walking among the rusted machinery, objects moving without cause, and cold spots so intense that officers could see their breath indoors. Screams and whispers echoed through the empty corridors, leaving witnesses with a sense that the factory itself had become a vessel for unseen forces. From the moment one steps inside the Houston abandoned factory, the atmosphere feels charged with energy. The air is thick and cold, carrying a chill that seeps into the bones. Footsteps echo unnaturally across the vast, open spaces, and the hum of distant machinery, though no power runs through bodinga, creates a subtle vibration that adds to the sense of unease. Investigators report an immediate impression that they are being watched, as if the very walls contain an awareness of human presence. Long corridors and cavernous rooms amplify every sound, and shadows stretch across surfaces in ways that defy the angles of light, creating an ever-shifting environment where the ordinary becomes uncanny. Apparitions walking among the machinery were among the most commonly reported phenomena. Witnesses describe faint, translucent figures drifting between rusted conveyor belts and stacks of abandoned crates. These figures appeared humanoid yet indistinct, sometimes pausing near equipment as though inspecting it, then moving silently out of sight. One investigator reported seeing a figure turn toward him before vanishing entirely into the darkness. The apparitions often seemed aware of observers, their movements deliberate, heightening the feeling that the factory was alive with entities that belonged to another time, another reality. Objects moving independently were also frequently documented. Chairs, tools, and pieces of machinery shifted positions without any human interaction. In some cases, items toppled or fell unexpectedly, creating startling noises in the otherwise silent building. Private investigators noted that the movement often coincided with other phenomena, such as apparitions appearing or cold spots forming. At times, the objects seemed to move with purpose, guiding attention to specific areas or aligning with the presence of spectral figures. These unexplained movements contributed to a growing sense that the factory was not simply a structure, but an active participant in the experiences of those inside. Cold spots were another hallmark of the Houston abandoned Factoria's haunting. Investigators described sudden drops in temperature so extreme that their breath became visible, even indoors and far from open doors or windows. The chill often coincided with other paranormal events, including sightings of figures or the movement of objects. Officers reported feeling an oppressive weight in these areas, a heaviness in the air that pressed on their bodies and heightened their sense of vulnerability. The intensity of the cold, combined with visual and auditory phenomena, created an immersive environment that was both physically and psychologically unnerving. Screams and whispers echoed to the empty corridors of the factory, often without a discernible source. Investigators described hearing anguished cries, hurried whispers, and conversations that seemed to replay fragments of the past. The sounds varied in tone, sometimes urgent and sharp, other times faint and mournful, drifting through rooms and hallways in ways that made it difficult to trace their origin. Many reported that the voices appear reactive, rising in volume or clarity as investigators move closer, then fading when approached directly. This interplay between sound, presence, and environment created the impression that the building itself was alive with residual energy. The Factoria's labyrinthine layout contributes to the intensity of the haunting. Long corridors, cramped offices, and expansive machinery floors create pockets where shadows linger and sounds echo unnaturally. Investigators noted that activity often concentrated in areas where historical accidents or incidents may have occurred, suggesting a link between past events and the current manifestations. The structure amplifies every sound, movement, and chill, making the environment feel unpredictable and dynamic. The combination of visual, auditory, and physical phenomena reinforces the sense that the Houston abandoned factory exists as a space where normal rules of reality are suspended. Witnesses also report feelings of disorientation and anxiety that seem to intensify over time. Many describe a creeping sensation of being followed, a pressure in the chest, or an instinctive urge to retreat even when there is no apparent danger. These psychological effects are often compounded by the visual and auditory manifestations, making even brief investigations deeply unnerving. Officers have noted that the building seems to interact with the living, responding to movement and attention in subtle but persistent ways, creating a haunting that is active rather than passive. The Houston abandoned factory continues to draw attention from paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and curious locals. Its history, combined with repeated and documented unexplained phenomena, makes it a place where the past feels vividly present. Those who enter leave with more than memories of rusted machinery and dilapidated walls. They carry the impression of apparitions moving silently among corridors, objects shifting without cause, screams and whispers that linger in the mind, and cold spots that seem to bite into the very flesh. The Houston abandoned factory in Texas stands as a stark example of a place where the ordinary and the supernatural intersect. Apparitions drift among rusted machinery, objects move independently, cold spots chill the air, and unseen voices echo through empty halls. For those who enter, the factory is not merely an abandoned industrial city. It is a space where history, energy, and the unexplained converge, leaving a lasting impression of mystery, unease, and the undeniable presence of the unseen. The Philadelphia Hospital in Pennsylvania is a sprawling medical complex with a history stretching back over a century. While much of the hospital operates as a functioning healthcare facility, one particular wing that closed for decadesa has become the focus of eerie reports. That have unsettled staff, patients, and investigators alike. Incidents that defied medical explanation. And appear to coincide with reports of paranormal activity. Witnesses describe shadowy figures moving silently through hallways, doors opening on their own, and whispers that called out the names of patients long deceased. Security cameras documented ghostly shapes hovering over gurneys, leaving those who entered the wing with a deep sense of unease and the undeniable impression that the space was alive with unseen forces. Staff members were among the first to report strange phenomena. Nurses and cleaning personnel, tasked with occasional maintenance, described walking down the dimly lit corridors of the closed wing and sensing the presence of someone behind them, only to turn and find no one. Shadowy figures were often glimpsed at the end of hallways or in empty rooms, appearing humanoid yet indistinct, as though the light itself struggled to define their form. Many reported a cold, oppressive energy that seemed to press down on the body, intensifying as they approached certain rooms or areas where past patients had been treated. Even seasoned hospital staff, accustomed to high stress and emotionally charged environments, found themselves unnerved by the persistent feeling of being observed. Doors within the abandoned wing were frequently implicated in the haunting. Many witnesses described doors swinging open or slamming shut without any physical cause. Some doors seemed to lock themselves, while others unlocked without explanation, often coinciding with other occurrences, such as movement in the shadows or whispered voices. Investigators noted that the door activity often concentrated near patient rooms that had long been closed, suggesting a link between the supernatural phenomena and the history of the Hospitalet S patients. Whispers calling out the names of deceased patients were among the most disturbing reports. Detectives and staff alike heard voices drifting through hallways, sometimes faint and sometimes urgent, repeating names that belonged to patients who had passed decades earlier. The whispers seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing off the walls and amplifying the eerie acoustics of the abandoned wing. Many described the sensation of the whispers responding to their movements, rising in volume as they drew near and fading when they retreated. The psychological effect of hearing the names of long-departed patients contributed to a pervasive feeling that the wing was inhabited by lingering spirits tied to past tragedies. Footage revealed ghostly shapes hovering above empty gurneys, often appearing as semi-transparent forms that drifted slowly across the floor. In several instances, the figures seemed to interact with the environment, moving between rooms or pausing at doorways before vanishing. These visual anomalies were captured on multiple cameras across different nights, ruling out simple technical malfunctions. Officers reviewing the footage noted the Shapiza deliberate movements and the eerie impression that the figures were aware of being observed. Investigators also noted unexplained injuries among those entering the wing. Cuts, bruises, and scratches appeared on staff and detectives after visits, with no logical source. The injuries often coincided with sightings of shadowy figures or other paranormal activity, leading some to speculate that the entities were capable of interacting with the physical world. Others theorized that the presence exerted a psychological influence, causing tension, disorientation, and accidents that could result in harm. Regardless of the cause, the reports contributed to the hospital wing's growing reputation as a dangerous and haunted environment. The abandoned wing's architecture seemed to amplify the haunting. Long, narrow hallways, high ceilings, and echoing corridors created spaces where shadows lingered and sounds carried unnaturally. Certain rooms appear to concentrate activity more than others, often corresponding with areas where the most serious or mysterious medical cases had occurred. Investigators noted that the energy seemed to respond to presence, intensify when people entered certain zones, and subsiding when they left. This dynamic environment contributed to the perception that the wing itself was an active participant in the manifestations. Witnesses also described sudden changes in temperature. Cold spots appeared unpredictably, sometimes so intense that breath became visible indoors, adding a physical reminder of the supernatural presence. These chills often coincided with visual or auditory phenomena, reinforcing the sense that multiple layers of activity were occurring simultaneously. The combination of shadowy figures, moving objects, whispers, and cold spots created an immersive experience that left those inside both frightened and fascinated. The Philadelphia Hospital wing remains a place of mystery and apprehension. Its combination of historical significance, unexplained injuries, and documented paranormal activity continues to attract investigators and curious observers. Visitors report more than just structural decay. They recount the impression of figures moving silently, whispers calling out from empty rooms, doors behaving independently, and ghostly shapes hovering over gurneys. For anyone who steps inside, the abandoned wing is not merely a relic of medical historia. It is a space where the boundary between the living and the unseen is blurred, where the past continues to echo and where the presence of the unknown is inescapably felt. The Philadelphia Hospital in Pennsylvania serves as a stark reminder that even places designed to heal can harbor shadows of tragedy. Shadowy figures roam deserted hallways. Doors swing without cause. Whispers carry the names of the long dead. And ghostly shapes drift above gurneys. Investigators, staff, and witnesses alike leave with the enduring impression of a wing alive with unseen activity. A haunting where every step, sound, and sight reinforces the inescapable sense of the paranormal. The New York City brownstone is a stately building tucked between the narrow streets of Manhattan. Its brick FAA section odd and ornate stoop, reflecting the character of a bygone era. From the outside, it appears like any other historic brownstonia, elegant, solid, and timeless, but within its walls, tenants have reported experiences that defy explanation. Private investigators were called after multiple tenants heard cries echoing through the hallways and footsteps pacing rooms that were otherwise empty. Witnesses described objects levitating, mirrors reflecting figures who were not present, and an oppressive energy that seemed to thrum through the very walls. Detectives investigating the property noted that these phenomena were not isolated. They appeared across multiple floors and rooms, suggesting a presence that was both pervasive and intelligent. The initial reports came from long-term tenants who had grown accustomed to city noise, but were unprepared for the disturbances inside their own homes. Doors would creak open or slam shut without cause, and distant footsteps would echo through hallways late at night. Some tenants reported the sensation of being watched, a subtle but unmistakable feeling that intensified in certain rooms. Shadows seemed to move independently of light sources, sometimes darting across walls or lingering at the edges of vision before disappearing entirely. The combination of auditory, visual, and physical phenomena created an environment of heightened tension, leaving occupants uneasy and prompting them to seek professional investigation. Objects moving independently became one of the first signs noted by investigators. Chairs, books, and small decorative items would shift positions, tilt, or fall without any logical explanation. In some instances, objects were observed levitating for brief moments before gently dropping back into place. These incidents often coincided with other manifestations, such as a fleeting shadow or a sudden chill in the air, giving the impression that the building itself was alive with unseen forces. Tenants described instances where personal belongings appeared to rearrange themselves into patterns that seemed deliberate, as if the unseen presence was attempting to communicate or mark its territory. Mirrors within the brownstone also played a central role in the haunting. Tenants and investigators alike reported seeing figures and reflections that were not present in the room. At times, these figures appeared as shadowy silhouettes, while on other occasions they seemed more distinct, resembling former residents or unknown individuals dressed in period clothing. Approaching the mirror often caused the figures to vanish, leaving only the normal reflection behind. Some witnesses described the unsettling experience of looking into a mirror and seeing multiple figures moving behind them, although turning around revealed an empty room. These mirror phenomena reinforce the impression that the brownstone was a place where dimensions of time and space overlapped, where past and present interacted in subtle and unnerving ways. Footsteps and cries were among the most persistent auditory experiences reported. Investigators documented the sound of pacing across hallways, the scuff of shoes on old wood floors, an occasional muffled sobbing that seemed to echo from rooms long unoccupied. The cries were particularly unnerving, often described as urgent, mournful, or pleading, leaving those who heard them with a profound sense of empathy for whatever unseen occupant might be producing them. Detectives also used specialized equipment to measure unusual energy readings throughout the brownstone. Devices detected electromagnetic fluctuations, temperature anomalies, and other phenomena that defied natural explanation. Some rooms consistently register higher readings, particularly those with frequent visual or auditory activity, suggesting that the energy was concentrated in certain areas. Investigators noted that these readings often coincided with moments of heightened activity, such as levitating objects, moving shadows, or the appearance of figures in mirrors. The combination of environmental data and eyewitness accounts created a compelling case that the building was host to genuine, unexplained phenomena. The structure of the brownstone itself seems to amplify the haunting. Narrow corridors, high ceilings, and staircases create an environment where sound carries unpredictably. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, and air movement can become turbulent without cause. Certain rooms appear to act as focal points for activity, drawing both investigators and residents into areas where manifestations were most intense. In these spaces, the sensation of being observed intensified, cold spots developed, and objects moved with greater frequency, leaving no doubt that something beyond ordinary perception was influencing the environment. Witnesses often describe a psychological impact, as well as the physical phenomena. Many report feelings of anxiety, unease, and disorientation while inside the brownstone. Some have experienced a creeping sense of dread, the sensation of invisible hands brushing against them, or the impression of a presence following them through rooms. These effects are subtle but persistent, compounding the evidence that the brownstone's hauntings are both experiential and interactive, engaging occupants on multiple sensory levels. The New York City brownstone continues to fascinate and unsettle. Investigators, tenants, and paranormal enthusiasts alike are drawn to its history, architecture, and persistent supernatural activity. Visitors leave not only with memories of ornate moldings, polished wood floors, and dimly lit staircases, but also with the lingering impression of figures and mirrors, objects moving independently, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and cries that seem to emanate from nowhere. The building is more than a historical residencia. It is a space where energy, memory, and the unseen converge, leaving those who enter to confront phenomena that challenge both perception and belief. The brownstone in New York City stands as a stark reminder that some buildings carry more than bricks and mortar. Shadowy figures drift silently, objects levitate, mirrors reflect the unseen, footsteps echo through empty corridors, and cries resonate with no apparent source. Detectives and tenants alike leave with an enduring impression of presence, energy, and mystery. The brownstone is not merely a home or historical structurea. It is a place where the ordinary meets the inexplicable and where the boundary between the living and the unseen remains tantalizingly thin. The Cleveland train yard in Ohio has long been a hub of activity by day, a sprawling network of tracks, rail cars, and industrial equipment buzzing with the rhythm of city transportation. But at night, the yard takes on a completely different character, one shrouded in shadows, silence, and phenomena that defy logical explanation. Detectives were called to investigate a series of nighttime accidents that seemed inexplicable, occurring even when safety protocols were strictly followed. Reports from workers and witnesses described shadowy figures moving along the tracks, disappearing when approached, and voices whispering names or warnings in the darkness. Surveillance cameras captured flickering shapes that had no correlation with passing trains or any visible source, adding a layer of undeniable evidence to the growing sense that the yard was haunted by unseen entities. The initial reports came from night shift workers tasked with maintaining the yard as a complex system of tracks and equipment. Many described encountering figures standing on or near the rails, seemingly observing them from a distance. These figures appear humanoid but indistinct, composed of shifting shadows rather than solid matter. Workers attempting to approach the shapes found them disappearing before any interaction could occur, leaving only the empty tracks and an unsettling stillness. The figure's sudden appearances and vanishings created a tension that permeated the yard, making even routine tasks feel unpredictable and dangerous. Alongside the visual phenomena, auditory experiences were consistently reported. Workers heard whispers, sometimes faint and sometimes urgent, echoing across the vast expanse of the yard. These whispers often carried names or cryptic warnings, phrases that seemed directed at those present even though the source was nowhere to be found. Footsteps were another common occurrence, pacing across gravel or clanking along metal walkways, though no person was visible. The combination of whispers, footsteps, and vanishing figures created an immersive environment that felt both interactive and threatening, heightening the anxiety of anyone who ventured into the yard after dark. Surveillance cameras added compelling evidence to the accounts. Footage revealed shadowy forms flickering across the tracks, moving between rail cars and along maintenance areas. The figures did not match the movement of trains or workers, nor were they caused by lighting anomalies or reflections. In some frames, the shapes appear to pause mid-step, watching the yard or even the camera itself, before vanishing entirely. The repetition of these occurrences across multiple nights and camera angles suggested a persistent presence, one that existed independently of human activity and seemed aware of observers. Its network of parallel tracks, towering rail cars, and dimly lit maintenance sheds creates deep pockets of shadow where movement and sound can be distorted. Long stretches of empty rails serve as corridors along which the shadowy figures seem to glide, and reflective surfaces on the metal tracks occasionally multiply or fragment their forms. Certain areas were reported to be hotspots, locations where both figures and whispers appeared more frequently, suggesting that the Yard's geometry and history may play a role in concentrating the supernatural activity. Detectives investigating the Yard observed a pattern in the accidents that drew them deeper into the mystery. Incidents often occurred near areas where shadowy figures were seen or where whispers had been reported. Objects, tools, equipment, and maintenance carts were sometimes found moved from their previous positions, occasionally in ways that suggested deliberate interference. Officers noted an oppressive energy in these locations, a sensation of being watched, and a sudden chill in the air. Some reported a feeling of unease so intense that it impeded concentration, as if the Yard itself was exerting influence over the minds and bodies of those present. Witnesses often reported the interplay between visual, auditory, and physical phenomena. The shadowy figures were rarely static, sometimes gliding slowly across the tracks or appearing near maintenance areas before vanishing into darkness. Whispers seemed to follow these figures, as though the two manifestations were connected or part of the same consciousness. Cold drafts often accompanied sightings, with temperatures dropping abruptly, making breath visible even in mild conditions. The combination of these factors created an immersive experience that was difficult to ignore or rationalize, leaving workers and detectives alike questioning the nature of reality within the Yard at night. The Cleveland train yard had become a site of fascination, drawing attention from investigators, thrill seekers, and paranormal enthusiasts. Witnesses leave not just with memories of rails, switches, and industrial architecture, but with a lasting impression of a space inhabited by unseen entities. Shadowy figures glide silently, whispers echo in names and warnings, and objects shift in ways that defy explanation. Surveillance footage provides haunting visual confirmation, while the cold, oppressive atmosphere leaves visitors with a tangible sense of the unknown. The Yard continues to operate by day, bustling with trains and workers, but by night it transforms into a domain where the ordinary intersects with the inexplicable. Shadowy figures move along the tracks, whispering voices drift through empty corridors, and surveillance cameras record shapes that vanish when approached. The Cleveland train yard is more than a functional transportation hub. It is a place where the past and the unseen linger, where the boundary between reality and the supernatural feels thin, and where every step in the darkness carries the weight of the unexplained. The Seattle Lighthouse in Washington stands tall along the rugged coastline, its whitewashed exterior and towering structure guiding ships safely through treacherous waters for over a century. By day, it is an iconic landmark, its sweeping views of the Puget Sound attracting tourists and locals alike. But by night, the lighthouse becomes a place of mystery and unease. Private investigators were called after multiple night watchmen reported hearing footsteps echoing through the tower, whispers in the darkness, and occasional glimpses of figures walking along the beam of the lighthouse before vanishing entirely. What began as isolated accounts quickly grew into a full investigation, as witnesses described phenomena that defied logical explanation, leaving detectives with the sense that the lighthouse itself was alive with unseen energy. Night watchmen were the first to report unusual activity, tasked with monitoring the lighthouse's light and ensuring the safety of passing vessels. They began noticing sounds that could not be explained by wind, waves, or the old mechanics of the tower. Footsteps echoed along the spiral staircase, sometimes pacing steadily, other times stopping abruptly as though the walker had sensed their presence. Whispers drifted through the stone and metal structure, uttering words, names, and fragmented phrases that seemed directed at those on duty. Some watchmen described the sensation of being watched from above, an invisible gaze that followed them as they moved from the base of the tower to the observation deck. Investigators quickly realized that the activity was not limited to auditory phenomena. Figures were reported moving along the beam of light emitted from the lighthouse, appearing as silhouettes gliding just beyond the reach of human vision. Witnesses described the figures as human-shaped yet indistinct, often vanishing when approached or when light was directed at them. In some instances, these apparitions seemed to walk along the tower's narrow ledges or perch near the observation windows, maintaining a presence that was both eerie and deliberate. The figure's appearances created a sense of connection between the lighthouse and the surrounding night sky, as though the spirits were tied not only to the building but to the vast expanse of water and darkness it overlooked. Cold spots were another consistent phenomenon documented during the investigation. Officers and private investigators described sudden drops in temperature, sometimes concentrated in specific areas of the tower. These chills were strong enough that breath became visible indoors, even in otherwise mild weather, creating an immediate and physical reminder of the lighthouse's spectral occupants. The cold seemed to coincide with sightings of figures or the sound of footsteps, reinforcing the impression that these occurrences were connected and not random. In some cases, investigators reported the sensation of oppressing weight, as though the air itself had thickened with an invisible presence. The spiral staircase and observation deck became focal points of paranormal activity. Investigators noted that the sound of footsteps often originated from these areas, even when no one was ascending or descending. Whispers echoed up the stairwell, carrying phrases that sometimes included names of former keepers or phrases like a watch the lighter or a do not leave a. Figures were occasionally glimpsed along the observation deck, silhouetted against the lighthouse's powerful beam or the reflection of the moon on the water below. As investigators approached, the shapes would vanish into darkness, leaving only the wind, the waves, and persistent echo of their passage. Surveillance equipment captured additional evidence that baffled investigators. Cameras positioned along the tower recorded fleeting shadows, moving in patterns that could not be explained by mechanical parts or passing animals. Some frames revealed indistinct shapes walking along the beam of the lighthouse, only to disappear in the next frame. Thermal imaging detected pockets of cold that coincided with these visual phenomena, providing further indication that the activity was more than a trick of the light. Equipment readings suggested fluctuations in electromagnetic energy throughout the tower, particularly near the areas where figures and sounds were most frequently reported. Witnesses also reported objects moving without explanation. Tools, papers, and even maintenance equipment were sometimes found displaced, as though nudged or lifted by invisible hands. These incidents, though subtle, occurred in conjunction with other manifestations, reinforcing the sense that the lighthouse was not a passive location, but an active site of paranormal energy. Investigators described the building as almost sentient, responding to human presence and shifting activity based on who entered the tower and when. The lighthouse's location on the rocky coastline may amplify its supernatural activity. Surrounded by water, cliffs, and the open night sky, the tower is isolated, lending itself to experiences where natural sounds blend with unexplained phenomena. The combination of shadowy figures, whispers, moving objects, and sudden cold creates an environment that is immersive, intense, and difficult to rationalize. Many investigators noted that the longer they remained inside, the stronger the impression that they were interacting with entities that had existed in the space long before them. Visitors and personnel who enter Seattle Lighthouse after dark report more than the impressive views or historic architecture. They describe the lingering sensation of unseen eyes upon them, footsteps echoing along spiral staircases, cold drafts that cut to the bone, and figures walking along the beam of light, disappearing before they can be fully seen. The lighthouse is not merely a beacon for ships. It is a place where history, energy, and the unexplained converge. The Seattle Lighthouse in Washington stands as a testament to the intersection of the ordinary and the supernatural. Figures move along the light beam and vanish into darkness. Whispers echo with names of the past. Objects shift inexplicably, and cold spots chill the air. Private investigators, night watchmen, and visitors alike leave with the unmistakable impression of a presence beyond human understanding. The lighthouse is more than a guiding lighter. It is a sentinel of unseen forces, a place where the boundary between the living and the spectral is disturbingly thin. The Miami Bay Mansion in Florida is a sprawling estate perched along the water's edge, its grand architecture and manicured grounds giving the appearance a luxurious retreat. By day, the mansion gleams under the sun, its walls echoing with the laughter and footsteps of past celebrations. By night, however, the mansion transforms into a place of unease and unexplained activity. Detectives were called to investigate after multiple reports from caretakers and residents described furniture moving on its own, chilling whispers in empty rooms, and shadowy figures appearing unexpectedly in hallways. Witnesses spoke of malevolent presence that seemed to watch and interact with them, leaving them fearful and questioning their own senses. Security cameras added further evidence, capturing orbs of light moving independently through rooms, providing an undeniable indication that something beyond the ordinary lingered within the Mansion-S walls. The first reports came from night staff who maintained the mansion during periods when it was unoccupied. They described hearing footsteps pacing through hallways, even when they were alone. Doors open and close without cause, sometimes slowly, as if pushed by an invisible hand, and sometimes with violent force, slamming against walls with a loud crash. Chairs and other small pieces of furniture were observed shifting slightly, while heavier objects were occasionally displaced entirely from their original positions. The frequency and intensity of these events left staff members unsettled, prompting calls to private investigators to determine whether the activity had a rational explanation or if something supernatural was at play. Investigators noted that the Mansion-S layout appeared to amplify the activity. Long corridors, high ceiling, and expansive rooms created a sense of space in which sounds carried unnaturally. Shadows shifted along walls in ways that could not be attributed to lighting or architectural design. Some figures appeared as mere silhouettes, humanoid but indistinct, while others seemed more solid, moving deliberately along hallways before vanishing when approached. Witnesses described the sensation of being watched from multiple angles simultaneously, a feeling that became increasingly intense in rooms where previous sightings had been reported. Chilling whispers were among the most frequently documented phenomena. These whispers seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing through the mansion with phrases that were sometimes unintelligible and other times recognizable as warnings or personal addresses. Investigators and witnesses alike reported hearing their names called softly, accompanied by vague threats or urgent commands. The whispers often coincided with other manifestations, such as furniture movement or shadowy figures appearing, creating a layered experience that was both auditory and visual. Many described a physical reaction to these with spursa, a sudden shiver, goosebumps, or an instinctive urge to leave the room, emphasizing the intensity of the Mansion-S presence. Security footage provided some of the most compelling evidence of the Mansion-S unusual activity. Cameras captured glowing orbs drifting through hallways, moving independently of any light sources or reflections. In some recordings, the orbs appear to interact with objects, passing through furniture or walls without obstruction. At times, figures could be seen walking behind the orbs, their forms flickering in and out of view as they moved. Investigators reviewed the footage repeatedly, noting that the activity occurred across multiple nights and locations, ruling out equipment malfunction or human interference. These images reinforced the reports of witnesses and highlighted the mansion as a focal point of sustained and unexplainable phenomena. The malevolent nature of the presence was another recurring theme. Witnesses described a sense of hostility, as if the entity or entities were aware of their observation and actively sought to influence or intimidate. Shadows would shift suddenly when approached. Cold gusts of air would sweep through rooms without cause, and some individuals felt as though they were being followed from room to room. Investigators remarked on the psychological impact of the presence. Anxiety, unease, and even fear intensified in those exposed to repeated manifestations. The mansion seemed to engage with those inside, responding to attention and creating an immersive experience that was difficult to ignore. The Mansion-S history may contribute to the strength of its haunting. Stories suggest that past owners and occupants experienced unexplained deaths, tragedies, and incidents of violence, leaving an imprint on the estate that continues to manifest in the present. Investigators speculated that the orbs, shadows, and whispered voices could be residual energy tied to those events, or perhaps an active presence with awareness of the living. The concentration of activity in certain rooms, especially bedrooms, hallways, and grand entertaining spaces, suggested that past events left a lasting influence on specific areas of the mansion. Visitors and staff alike report more than just sightings and sounds. They describe an overall sense of oppression, a heaviness in the air that presses on the chest, a feeling that every movement is being watched and measured. Objects move independently. Shadows flicker along walls, orbs float in patterns that defy explanation, and whispers carry words that chill the mind. Even in the broad, sunlit rooms of day, the memory of night activity lingers, creating an atmosphere of tension and unease. The Miami Bay mansion remains a place of fascination and fear. Detectives, caretakers, and paranormal investigators leave with a vivid sense that the building is not merely a structure of walls and windows, but a living space inhabited by unseen forces. Furniture moves without explanation, shadows glide along hallways, orbs drift across rooms, and whispers echo with voices that seem aware of the living. The mansion is not merely a luxurious estancia, it is a site where history, energy, and the unexplained converge, leaving an indelible impression of the supernatural that continues to haunt all who enter. The Miami Bay mansion in Florida stands as a chilling example of a residence where the ordinary and the paranormal intersect. Figures appear in hallways, objects shift independently, whispers call out from empty rooms, and orbs of light move with deliberate purpose. For those who enter, the mansion is not just a home yet, it is a presence, a space alive with unseen forces that defy explanation, and a reminder that the boundaries between the living and the unseen can be impossibly thin. The Minneapolis School in Minnesota is a large, imposing building, its brick FAA section Ade and tall windows reflecting decades of education and community life. By day, the hallways are filled with sedential laughter, the clatter of lockers, and the hum of learning. By night, however, the school transforms into a different world, of one where shadows linger, and the ordinary rules of sound and movement seem suspended. Detectives were called after repeated reports of haunting activity that left teachers, custodians, and security personnel unnerved. Witnesses described shadowy figures watching from corners, doors slamming without cause, and lights flickering inexplicably in classrooms long empty. Witnesses described shadowy figures watching from corners, doors slamming without cause, and lights flickering inexplicably in classrooms long empty. Witnesses described shadowy figures watching from corners, doors slamming without cause, and lights flickering inexplicably in classrooms long empty. Paranormal investigators, called to document the activity, recorded cold spots so intense that their breath became visible indoors and heard strange, untraceable sounds echoing through deserted halls, suggesting the school had become a conduit for unseen forces. Many described an overwhelming sense of being watched, often from darkened corners or empty classrooms. Shadowy figures would appear briefly at the edge of vision, sometimes hovering near desks or at the end of hallways, before vanishing the moment they were fully observed. The investigators, determined to uncover the truth, start to set up their equipment, hoping to capture some concrete evidence of the paranormal activity. Teachers reported the sensation that these figures were intelligent, as though aware of human presence, observing, or even testing the boundaries of those who entered the school after hours. The sheer persistence of the sightings prompted calls to law enforcement and eventually to private detectives for a professional investigation. Doors were among the most active objects in haunting. Staff reported doors swinging open or slamming shut with force, often coinciding with other phenomena, such as flickering lights or moving shadows. Classrooms that had been locked and secured would occasionally be found open in the morning, and sometimes lights would switch on or off despite no electrical faults being present. Witnesses noted a pattern in this activity, suggesting that the phenomenon was not random but reactive, as though the building itself or its unseen occupants were deliberately interacting with those inside. Shadow figures appeared in a variety of forms. Some were vague silhouettes, almost as if made of smoke, while others seemed more solid, taking on human-like shapes that mimicked natural movement. They were frequently seen along hallways, peering from doorways, or standing silently in the middle of classrooms. Many witnesses reported feeling a chill or a pressure in the air whenever these figures appeared, as though the room itself had been altered in the presence of something otherworldly. Investigators noted that the figures rarely moved rapidly. Instead, they seemed to glide or linger, their presence imposing and deliberate. Lights flickering on and off contributed to the unsettling environment. In several cases, entire wings of the building experienced sudden blackouts, followed by bursts of illumination, sometimes cycling repeatedly. These occurrences coincided with reports of shadowy figures or audible phenomena, reinforcing the sense that the events were connected. Staff described watching as lights would dim or brighten seemingly in response to movement, creating an eerie atmosphere where the line between the natural and supernatural became blurred. Paranormal investigators documented other phenomena using specialized equipment. Cold spots were recorded in multiple classrooms, hallways, and stairwells, often coinciding with sightings of figures or sounds. Temperature fluctuations were sudden and localized, leaving investigators physically aware of the disturbances. Sound sensors captured echoes of footsteps, whispers, and indistinct conversations, yet when rooms were entered, no one was present. The combination of visual, auditory, and physical phenomena suggested a multi-layer haunting, engaging witnesses on several sensory levels simultaneously. Some staff reported psychological effects as well. Anxiety, unease, and a creeping sense of dread were common when spending extended time in the building after hours. Several described feeling followed as they moved between rooms, sensing presence behind them even when nothing was visible. Investigators noted that the haunting seemed responsive, as if the activity intensified when attention was paid, then diminished when observers ignored it, creating an interactive and immersive experience that was difficult to dismiss. The history of the Minneapolis school may play a role in the haunting. Built decades ago and home to countless students, teachers, and administrators over the years, the building has witnessed countless events, both mundane and tragic. Some investigators theorize that residual energy from past events or accidents, emotional turmoil, or long-forgotten incidenza could be manifesting in the present, shaping the behavior of the shadows, whispers, and cold spots. The areas most affected were often those with historical significance, such as old classrooms, auditoriums, or stairwells that had seen years of student activity. Witnesses described entering the school after hours and sensing more than just echoes of past activity. They saw shadowy figures, felt cold spots, experienced doors moving independently, and watched lights flicker without explanation. Strange sounds of footsteps, whispers, and soft thuds reverberated through hallways, making even brief visits unnerving. The combination of sensory experiences, historical resonance, and interactive phenomena created an environment that left a lasting impression on all who entered the school after hours, and sensing more than just echoes of past activity. They saw shadowy figures, felt cold spots, experienced doors moving independently, and watched lights flicker without explanation. Strange sounds of footsteps, whispers, and soft thuds reverberated through hallways, making even brief visits unnerving. The combination of sensory experiences, historical resonance, and interactive phenomena created an environment that left a lasting impression on all who entered the school after hours, and sensing more than just echoes of past activity. They saw shadowy figures, felt cold spots, experienced doors moving independently, and watched lights flicker without explanation. Strange sounds of footsteps, whispers, and soft thuds reverberated through hallways, making even brief visits unnerving. The combination of sensory experiences, historical resonance, and interactive phenomena created an environment that left a lasting impression on all who entered the school after hours, and sensing more than just echoes of past activity. They saw shadowy figures, felt cold spots, experienced doors moving independently, and watched lights flicker without explanation. Strange sounds of footsteps, whispers, and soft thuds reverberated through hallways, making even brief visits unnerving. The combination of sensory experiences, historical resonance, and interactive phenomena created an environment that left a lasting impression on all who entered. The Minneapolis school in Minnesota serves as a chilling example of a place where the ordinary and the supernatural converge. Shadowy figures glide along empty corridors, doors move without human touch, lights flicker unpredictably, and cold spots chill the air. Shadowy figures glide along empty corridors. Doors move without human touch. Lights flicker unpredictably, and cold spots chill the air. Shadowy figures glide along empty corridors. Doors move without human touch. Lights flicker unpredictably, and cold spots chill the air. Shadowy figures glide along empty corridors. Doors move without human touch. Lights flicker unpredictably, and cold spots chill the air. For those who step inside after hours, the school is not merely a place of learninga. It is a space where the past lingers, energy manifests, and the boundary between the living and the unseen remains disturbingly thin. For those who step inside after hours, the school is not merely a place of learninga. It is a space where the past lingers, energy manifests, and the boundary between the living and the unseen remains disturbingly thin. For those who step inside after hours, the school is not merely a place of learninga. It is a space where the past lingers, energy manifests, and the boundary between the living and the unseen remains disturbingly thin. For those who step inside after hours, the school is not merely a place of learninga. It is a space where the past lingers, energy manifests, and the boundary between the living and the unseen remains disturbingly thin. The Las Vegas Hotel in Nevada is a sprawling, glittering complex known for its luxury, entertainment, and bright neon lights that draw visitors from around the world. By day, it is alive with energetic guests rushing to casinos, pools filled with activity, and ballrooms hosting celebrations. Yet after the crowds dissipate, a different side of the hotel emerges, one that has left both staff and guests unsettled. Private detectives were called after repeated reports of paranormal activity, including shadowy figures seen roaming the hallways, furniture moving inexplicably, and mirrors reflecting people who were not present. Witnesses described a chilling sensation of unseen hands touching them, sudden cold drafts, and lights flickering in otherwise secure rooms. Security cameras captured orbs of light moving through walls, further fueling the impression that the hotel was inhabited by unseen, active forces. Initial reports came from hotel guests who stayed late in their rooms or returned from late-night events. Many claimed that while walking down hallways or entering rooms, they felt a presence behind them. Shadowy figures would appear at the edge of vision, peering from corners or standing near elevators, vanishing the instant they were approached. Some guests described furniture shifting slightly, chairs rocking or decorative objects tilting as if nudged by invisible hands. These subtle movements, combined with the visual manifestations, left visitors uneasy and often reluctant to remain in their rooms late at night. Mirrors in the hotel became another source of strange experiences. Guests and staff reported seeing figures and reflections that did not correspond to anyone present in the room. Some witnesses described full-bodied silhouettes, while others reported seeing only vague shapes or faces that appeared momentarily before fading. In some cases, approaching the mirror caused the figures to disappear, leaving a normal reflection behind. These encounters reinforced the sense that the hotel was not merely haunted by residual energy, but that some presence was actively observing and interacting with the living. Cameras installed throughout the hotel captured phenomena that defied logical explanation. Flickering orbs moved through hallways and walls, often changing direction or appearing to glide along ceilings before vanishing. Detectives and security personnel reviewed the footage, noting that the occurrences were consistent across multiple nights and cameras, ruling out technical glitches. The visual evidence corroborated the experiences described by witnesses and suggested an active, intelligent presence within the hotel. Guests frequently reported sensations of touch by unseen forces. Some described light brushes on their arms or shoulders, while others felt a stronger pressure, as if an invisible hand was holding them in place. These sensations often coincided with other manifestations, such as the appearance of shadow figures or flickering lights. Witnesses consistently described a sense of malevolence, or at least intent, as though the entities were aware of their presence and capable of interacting physically with them. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile phenomena created an immersive and unnerving experience, leaving guests feeling both observed and vulnerable. Hallways and stairwells were among the most active areas of the hotel. Shadowy figures were frequently reported standing silently in corridors, watching the movement of staff or guests before disappearing. Doors in these areas sometimes open and close on their own, and lights would flicker in patterns that did not correspond to electrical malfunctions. Investigators noted that activity was concentrated in older sections of the hotel, where historical events, renovations, and past tragedies may have left lingering energy. The layering of time and history seemed to enhance the intensity of the manifestations, making certain areas hotspots for paranormal activity. Auditory phenomena were also common. Guests reported hearing footsteps echoing through empty hallways, whispers in languages they could not understand, and faint laughter that seemed to drift from room to room. The sounds often appeared to respond to movement, increasing in volume or clarity as witnesses approached and fading when they retreated. These audio manifestations, combined with visual and physical encounters, created a multi-sensory experience that many described as overwhelming. Investigators also noted that the hotel's architecture may contribute to the haunting. Long corridors, high ceilings, and reflective surfaces create natural pathways for sound and light, which may enhance the perception of movement and presence. However, the consistency and repetition of the experiences, particularly the interaction with mirrors and furniture, suggest a phenomena beyond architectural explanation. The hotel seemed to act almost as a living entity, responding to the presence of humans and shaping the manifestations in ways that were both deliberate and unpredictable. The Las Vegas Hotel continues to operate as a premier destination, but the experiences of guests and staff leave a lingering impression of the supernatural. Shadowy figures glide through hallways. Furniture moves without explanation. Mirrors reflect unknown people. Unseen hands brush against visitors, and orbs of light traverse walls. Investigators, security personnel, and witnesses alike leave with the undeniable sense that the hotel is more than a bodega. It is a space inhabited by active, unseen forces. The Las Vegas Hotel in Nevada serves as a stark reminder that even places of luxury and entertainment can harbor mysteries beyond human understanding. Shadowy figures, moving furniture, flickering lights, spectral reflections, and invisible touches create a haunting that defies explanation. For those who traverse its corridors after hours, the hotel is not merely a place to stay, it is a living environment, where the boundary between the visible and the unseen is disturbingly thin. The St. Louis Bank of Missouri is a grand, imposing building, its marble FAA Section A and towering columns reflecting the city's prosperity from a bygone era. Though it has been closed to the public for decades, the building remains a focal point for local legends and eerie tales. Detectives were called after multiple reports of paranormal activity surfaced from security personnel, historians, and curious trespassers. Witnesses described shadowy figures moving silently among the vaults and teller desks, footsteps echoing through empty corridors, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Despite the building being officially closed and abandoned, these reports painted a vivid picture of a space still alive with unseen presence, as if the ghosts of the Bonki's past continued their silent watch. The first reports came from security officers hired to patrol the property occasionally. They described seeing figures gliding across the main lobby, sometimes near the grand teller counters or in front of locked vault doors. The figures were never fully visible, merely dark silhouettes, occasionally illuminated by the dim glow of flashlights or streetlights filtering through cracked windows. When approached, these apparitions would vanish instantly, leaving no trace behind. Officers reported feeling an intense sensation of being watched, even when alone, as though the building itself was observing and responding to their presence. Footsteps were a recurring phenomenon throughout the bank. Detected in corridors and vault areas, these footsteps echoed with surprising clarity despite the emptiness of the building. Sometimes they sounded slow and deliberate, marching steadily across marble floors. At other times, they were rapid and erratic, creating a sense of urgency. Officers often followed the sounds, only to find that they led nowhere or stopped abruptly, reinforcing the impression of intelligent, unseen occupants. Whispers accompanied the footsteps in many cases, faint voices calling names, issuing warnings or muttering unintelligible phrases. The auditory experiences added to a pervasive sense of unease, making it difficult for anyone to feel truly alone inside the building. The vaults themselves became focal points of activity. Detectives reported that the massive steel doors occasionally rattled or creaked without mechanical cause. Shadowy shapes appeared near the vaults, sometimes peering inside as if inspecting their contents. In rare instances, the sensation of a presence pressing close was reported, leaving witnesses with feeling a weight or resistance, as though something unseen shared a confined space with them. The bancas teller counters, filing rooms, and even abandoned offices also showed signs of interaction. Chairs would shift slightly, papers would stir as if caught in an invisible breeze, and objects left on desks would be found displaced hours later. Investigators employed cameras and audio equipment to capture evidence of the bancas' unusual activity. Recordings frequently showed fleeting shadows crossing hallways or vault areas, shadows that were not cast by any visible person. Thermal imaging cameras detected pockets of sudden cold, often coinciding with sightings of apparitions or sounds of footsteps. Audio sensors captured whispers and murmurs, sometimes rising in volume when investigators focused on them, then fading as the listeners moved closer. The combination of visual, auditory, and thermal evidence suggested that the activity was not merely psychological or imaginita. It had a tangible presence that interacted with the environment. Many witnesses described the psychological impact of spending time in the bank after hours. Anxiety, tension, and a sense of oppression were common, often accompanied by sudden cold chills and the sensation of unseen eyes following them. Some reported feeling touched lightly on the arm or shoulder, despite no one else being present. The persistent combination of visual, auditory, and physical phenomena created a highly immersive and disorienting experience, making the building feel alive in a way that went far beyond its empty rooms and silent corridors. The history of the St. Louis Bank may help explain the intensity of its haunting. Once a bustling financial hub, the bank was home to countless employees, clients, and officials over decades. Stories suggest that some past employees suffered tragic events, including sudden deaths, robberies, and unexplained accidents, leaving emotional and energetic imprints on the building. Paranormal investigators speculate that these residual energies may manifest as the shadowy figures, whispers, and footsteps reported today. But the apparent responsiveness of the phenomena suggests the possibility of conscious spirits, not mere echoes of the past. The bank's architecture amplifies the haunting. High ceiling, long corridors, and expansive marble floors create natural reverberations for sound, while the intricate layout of offices, vaults, and corridors allows shadows to linger and move in unexpected ways. Investigators noted that the most active areas were often those with the richest history, such as the main lobby, the central vault, and offices once occupied by prominent bank officials. These spaces seem to act as anchors for the manifestations, drawing attention and activity to specific points within the building. Visitors and investigators alike report more than just sightings and sounds. They describe a pervasive feeling of being observed, a weight in the air, and the presence of something unseen interacting with the environment. Shadowy figures glide along hallways. Footsteps echo where no one walks. Whispers call out names and warnings, and objects move without explanation. The St. Louis Bank of Missouri is not just an abandoned bodega. It is a site where history, memory, and the supernatural converge, leaving a lingering impression of a presence that refuses to fade. The St. Louis Bank stands as a chilling example of a place where the ordinary and the unexplained coexist. Shadowy figures traverse empty vaults and hallways. Whispers carry across deserted offices. Footsteps echo in marble corridors. And objects move without human contact. For those who enter after dark, it is a living reminder that the past, and that some spaces remain haunted long. After dark, the building is more than a relic, that the past never truly leaves, and that some spaces remain haunted. The Denver Firehouse in Colorado has long served as a hub of bravery and community service, its red brick exterior and towering doors a symbol of safety and vigilance. By day, firefighters move through the building with practice routines, maintaining equipment, training, and responding to emergencies. But after dark, the firehouse takes on a different character, one that has left both firefighters and detectives unsettled. Strange occurrences began disrupting night shifts, prompting investigators to document phenomena that defied explanation. Witnesses reported shadowy figures gliding through hallways, objects moving independently, and disembodied voices issuing commands in empty rooms. Witnesses reported shadowy figures gliding through hallways, objects moving independently, and disembodied voices issuing commands in empty rooms. Security cameras captured faint silhouettes vanishing into walls, reinforcing the sense that the firehouse was not merely a building of brick and steel, but a space occupied by unseen presences with purpose and awareness. The first reports came from firefighters assigned to overnight watch shifts. While completing routine checks or cleaning equipment, they began noticing footsteps echoing across the polished floors, though no one else was present. Doors would creak open slowly or slam shut with force, sometimes startling personnel and interrupting their tasks. Small objects, such as helmets, hoses, and tools, were occasionally displaced or found resting in locations different from where they had been left. Some firefighters reported the sensation of being followed, feeling an unseen presence tracking their movements through hallways and stairwells. These experiences were unsettling enough to prompt the involvement of detectives and private investigators experienced in paranormal phenomena. Shadow figures were among the most frequently reported phenomena. Witnesses described silhouettes appearing briefly in corridors or near equipment storage rooms. Some figures seemed humanoid, with distinct limbs and head shapes, while others were amorphous, blending with the shadows of firehouse. When approached, the figures would vanish, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps or a sudden drop in temperature. Firefighters noted that these apparitions often appeared near areas where previous activity had been observed, suggesting a pattern or concentration of energy within specific parts of the building. Voices added a chilling auditory layer to the haunting. Firefighters reported hearing orders called out in the same tone and cadence as past chiefs or commanding officers, even though the firehouse was empty. Commands such as a check the hoses, A or A report to the engine, A echoed through hallways, sometimes accompanied by the sound of unseen boots pacing the floors. The voices were clear and authoritative, creating an immersive experience that blurred the line between memory and reality. Some staff described hearing whispered conversations, faint arguments, or urgent instructions that seemed directed at them personally, heightening the sense of interaction with the unseen. Investigators documented the activity using cameras, motion sensors, and audio equipment. Security footage often revealed faint silhouettes moving along hallways or stairwells, appearing to pass through walls or solid objects. Thermal imaging cameras detected sudden cold spots, sometimes forming shapes consistent with the shadow figures reported by witnesses. Audio recordings captured footsteps, muffled voices, and the occasional metallic clanging of equipment moving on its own. The combination of visual, auditory, and thermal anomalies suggested that the phenomena were not merely the result of imagination or environmental factors, but involved an active presence capable of interacting with the physical space. Objects moving independently became another hallmark of the haunting. Hoses would shift from their racks, fire extinguishers would tilt or roll slightly, and chairs were found turned or displaced in rooms that had been left undisturbed. Investigators noted that these movements often coincided with sightings of shadowy figures, or auditory phenomena, suggesting a deliberate connection between the physical and spectral activity. Firefighters sometimes reported an uncanny feeling that the objects were moving in response to their actions or presence, as if the building itself or its unseen occupants were engaged in an ongoing interaction with them. The firehouse's history may help explain the intensity of the activity. Built decades ago, it has been a site of countless emergency responses, heroic actions, and occasional tragedies. Investigators speculated that the residual energy of these intense human experiences may have imprinted itself on the building, manifesting as apparitions, voices, and movement. Certain areas of the firehouse, particularly the main hall, equipment bays, and stairwells, seemed to concentrate activity, possibly due to their historical significance or the strong emotional energy associated with past events. Witnesses consistently described the psychological impact of the haunting. Anxiety, tension, and a sense of dread often accompanied encounters, intensified by the knowledge that the building had a long history. and that the manifestations seemed aware of observers, created an immersive environment that was difficult to dismiss, leaving a lasting impression on firefighters and investigators alike. Many reported an instinctive urge to move quickly through the hallways or exit the building, even when no immediate danger was present. The Denver Firehouse stands as more than a center of emergency response. It is a location where the ordinary intersects with the inexplicable. Shadow figures glide through corridors. Objects shift without human contact. Voices call out in empty rooms. And cold spots chill the air. Security cameras capture fleeting silhouettes vanishing into walls, reinforcing the reality of the phenomena. Firefighters and investigators alike leave with the sense that the building is alive with unseen energy, a place where history, memory, and the supernatural converge. For those who enter the Denver Firehouse at night, the building is not simply a site of work or historia. It is a space inhabited by unseen presences. Shadowy figures, moving objects, and disembodied voices create an environment where the boundary between the living and the spectral is impossibly thin. The firehouse remains a testament to the enduring impact of human experience and the unknown forces that may linger long after the lights have gone out. The Chicago Hotel in Illinois stands as an imposing structure in the heart of the city, its ornate FAA Section A and grand lobby hinting at decades of history, luxury, and countless stories. By day, it welcomes guests from across the world, bustling with activity, clinking glasses and the hum of conversation. By night, however, the hotel transforms into a different entity, one shrouded in mystery and unexplained phenomena. Private detectives were called after repeated reports from guests and staff of paranormal activity that could not be ignored. Visitors described seeing apparitions in hallways and rooms, hearing whispers in empty corridors, and witnessing objects moving independently. Investigators documented cold spots, shadowy shapes, and doors that open and close with no logical cause, painting a picture of a hotel alive with unseen presence and restless spirits. The first accounts came from overnight guests who stayed in the older wings of the hotel. Many reported waking in the middle of the night to find shadowy figures standing in corners, observing them silently. Some described full-bodied apparitions, faint but distinguishable, while others saw hazy, indistinct forms that seemed to shimmer in the low light. The figures occasionally moved, gliding silently across hallways or hovering near doors, but vanished when approached. Guests reported an immediate sense of dread when these figures appeared, often describing a cold, oppressive energy in the room that pressed against them like an invisible weight. Whispers added a chilling dimension to the activity. Visitors reported hearing soft murmurs, often indistinct, but sometimes clearly calling their names. The voices seemed to drift from the walls themselves, emanating from areas where no one could possibly be present. Some witnesses described hearing conversations in languages they did not understand, or phrases that made little sense but carried a menacing tone. The whispers often coincided with other phenomena, such as moving objects or apparitions, suggesting that the activity was not random but connected, deliberate, and perhaps even aware of the presence of living observers. Objects in the hotel frequently moved without explanation. Chairs, glasses, and decorative items were found displaced or tilted, as if handled by unseen hands. Some guests reported feeling a sudden brush against their arms or shoulders, an invisible touch that left them startled and anxious. In some rooms, heavier objects of tables, lamps, or suitcases shifted without any logical cause, adding to the sense that the hotel itself was actively responding to human presence. Cold spots were a common and unsettling feature of the hauntings. Investigators and guests alike reported sudden drops in temperature, sometimes localized to specific corners of a room or stretching across entire hallways. The cold was intense enough that breath became visible indoors, and many describe it as a chilling, almost physical force. These areas often coincided with sightings of apparitions or whispers, further reinforcing the connection between the physical sensations and the paranormal phenomena. Doors were another focal point of the activity. Investigators recorded these fluctuations with thermal cameras, noting that they often appeared and disappeared without explanation, moving unpredictably through the hotel. These areas often coincided with sightings of apparitions or whispers, further reinforcing the connection between the physical sensations and the paranormal phenomena. Guests reported doors opening or closing without being touched, sometimes slowly and deliberately, sometimes slamming shut with startling force. Investigators documented these occurrences, noting that they were not caused by faulty mechanisms, wind, or vibrations from nearby traffic. The door seemed to move in patterns that correspond with the presence of other phenomena, apparitions, whispers, or moving objects, suggesting a coordinated or intentional interaction between the unseen entities and the environment. Some of the most unnerving reports came from guests who experienced figures sitting silently at the foot of their beds. These figures were often human-shaped but shadowy, their features indistinct. They did not move or speak, yet their presence was intensely felt, producing a profound sense of unease and fear. Witnesses described an instinctive feeling of being observed, as if the figures were studying them or waiting for something. In many cases, the apparition disappeared when guests turned on lights or attempted to interact, leaving only the lingering sensation of a presence in the room. Investigators employed cameras, audio sensors, and thermal imaging to document the strange activity. Footage captured shadowy shapes crossing hallways or entering rooms where no one could be seen. Audio devices recorded whispers, muffled voices, and faint footsteps echoing in empty corridors. Thermal imaging revealed cold spots forming in patterns consistent with the reported sightings, providing further evidence that the occurrences were not illusions or fabrications. The consistency and repetition of these phenomena across multiple nights suggested a persistent, intelligent presence within the hotel. The Chicago hotel's history may play a role in the strength of its haunting. Decades of occupancy, countless guests, and past events, both celebratory and tragic, may have left energetic imprints that manifest today as apparitions, whispers, and moving objects. Investigators speculated that some of the activity could be residual energy from past events, while other phenomena appeared more interactive, responding to the presence and attention of the living. Guests and investigators alike describe a hotel as a place where the ordinary and the supernatural converge. Shadowy figures glide through hallways. Whispers carry across empty rooms. Objects move without cause. Cold spots chill the air. And figures sometimes sit silently at the foot of beds. The Chicago Hotel in Illinois is more than a historic lodginga. It is a site where unseen forces linger, creating an environment where the boundary between the living and the spectral is impossibly thin. Visitors leave with a sense that the hotel is alive in ways that defy understanding, a place where the past continues to interact with the present, and where the unseen is always watching. The New Orleans Cemetery in Louisiana is a historic and sprawling necropolis, its weathered tombstones and ornate mausoleums standing as silent witnesses to centuries of life and death. By day, the cemetery is a place of reflection, visited by historians, tourists, and locals paying respects. By night, however, it transforms into a realm of shadows and mystery, where the veil between the living and the dead feels disturbingly thin. Detectives were called to investigate after multiple reports of unexplained disturbances during nighttime hours. Witnesses described figures moving silently among the tombstones, whispers drifting through the fog, and lights flickering in ways that could not be explained by natural sources. Photographs captured by investigators revealed orbs of light and faint silhouettes, hinting at presences that existed beyond the ordinary, making the cemetery a focal point for paranormal intrigue. Initial reports came from night visitors, security personnel, and nearby residents who had walked the cemetery paths during the evening. Many described seeing shadowy forms gliding between the tombstones, moving with an unnatural fluidity that defied human motion. These figures were often partially obscured by the dense fog that rolls over the grounds, appearing as vague silhouettes that seem both solid and ephemeral at the same time. When approached, the shadows would vanish into the mist, leaving only a chill in the air and a lingering sense of being watched. The movement of these figures often coincided with the appearance of flickering lights, strange mists, or cold gusts that seemed localized and unexplainable. Whispers were a consistent phenomenon reported by witnesses. These were not simply the sounds of wind rustling leaves or branches, but distinct murmurs, sometimes calling names or issuing warnings in tones both urgent and mournful. Investigators noted that the voices appear to come from multiple directions at once, echoing between tombstones and mausoleums, and often fading when anyone attempted to focus on them directly. Some described hearing conversations in languages unfamiliar to them, lending a surreal and unsettling quality to the auditory experiences. The whispers were most frequently reported near older graves, suggesting that the history of the cemetery might play a role in the manifestations. Lights flickering across the graves added another layer of mystery. Witnesses reported sudden glows or flickers among the tombstones, sometimes appearing like lanterns swaying in an invisible breeze, and at other times resembling small orbs of moving energy. Cameras and long-exposure photographs often captured these lights as faint orbs hovering just above the ground or weaving through grave markers. Investigators noted that the lights did not correspond with nearby street lamps or reflective surfaces, and their movement patterns appeared deliberate, almost as if the entities were interacting with the living world. Faint silhouettes were frequently observed in photographs taken by investigators or visitors. These silhouettes appeared at the edges of frames, partially hidden behind monuments, or standing atop mausoleum steps. Some were clear enough to suggest human forms, while others were vague, almost smoky figures, difficult to define but unmistakably present. Thermal imaging and night vision cameras sometimes detected cold patches where these forms appeared, suggesting that the apparitions carried a tangible effect on the surrounding environment. The combination of visual, auditory, and temperature anomalies painted a compelling picture of a cemetery alive with unseen activity. Investigators also noted physical sensations reported by those on the grounds. Witnesses often described sudden chills that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, the feeling of a presence brushing past them, or an oppressive weight pressing down on shoulders and backs. These physical phenomena intensified the psychological effect, leaving visitors with an acute awareness of being observed. Many reported that the activity felt purposeful, almost interactive, as though the spirits were responding to their presence, or testing the boundaries between the living and the dead. Paths and walkways in the cemetery became hot spots for activity. Figures were seen moving along the narrow alleys between tombstones, hovering near crypts, or disappearing behind large monuments. Investigators reported that some areas, particularly older sections with elaborate grave markers, showed the highest concentration of paranormal events. Footsteps, whispers, flickering lights, and cold spots all seemed to converge in these spaces, creating an atmosphere thick with history, memory, and lingering energy. Photographic evidence often confirmed the experiences described by witnesses. Long exposure shots captured glowing orbs moving in arcs or hovering near specific tombstones. Faint shadows appeared where none should exist, and some images revealed indistinct forms standing at the edge of the frame, staring directly at the camera. Some images revealed indistinct forms standing at the edge of the frame, staring directly at the camera. These manifestations were consistent across multiple nights and locations within the cemetery, supporting the claims of repeated activity rather than isolated incidents. The New Orleans Cemetery stands as a place where the ordinary and the supernatural converge. Shadowy figures glide silently between tombstones, whispers echo through fog-laden air, lights flicker without source, and cold spots chill the ground. Whispers echo through fog-laden air, lights flicker without source, and cold spots chill the ground. Lights flicker without source, and cold spots chill the ground. Cold spots chill the ground. Cameras capture orbs and faint silhouettes, while visitors feel an unseen presence observing their every move. The cemetery is more than a historical site. It is a realm where the past lingers, and spirits continue to interact with the living world. For those who walk its grounds after dark, the New Orleans Cemetery is a haunting experience. Figures appear and vanish, whispers carry on the mist, lights shimmer across graves, and the sensation of being watched is inescapable. Detectives, investigators, and witnesses leave with the undeniable sense that the cemetery is alive with unseen energy, a place where the boundary between life and death is thin, and where the echoes of the past refuse to remain silent. The Baltimore apartment in Maryland is an unassuming residential building in a quiet neighborhood. Its brick exterior and modest lobby giving little hint of the activity that occurs inside after dark. By day, it is a typical apartment complex, with residents coming and going, children playing in nearby yards, and the hum of everyday life filling the hallways. At night, however, the building takes on a different character. Private investigators were called after repeated reports of paranormal phenomena from tenants and staff. Witnesses described hearing voices calling their names, objects flying across rooms, and shadowy figures appearing and disappearing in hallways. Some reported the unnerving sensation of being followed by unseen entities, while security cameras captured doors moving on their own, swinging open or closed without any physical contact. The first reports came from residents who had lived in the building for years. Many described strange experiences that began subtly a feeling of being watched, whispers from empty rooms, or a cold draft that seemed localized and unnatural. Over time, the incidents became more pronounced. Tenants reported seeing dark silhouettes moving along the corridors, sometimes peering around corners or standing silently near doors. When approached, these figures would vanish instantly, leaving a lingering sense of unease. Residents often described the presence as intentional, as though it was aware of them and capable of observing their actions. Voices were a particularly disturbing feature of the activity. Multiple witnesses claimed to hear their names being called in low, urgent tones, echoing from hallways or empty apartments. The voices were sometimes accompanied by whispers or conversations that made little sense but carried a menacing cadence. Some residents reported that the calls seemed to follow them as they moved through the building, growing louder when they approached certain areas and fading when they turned away. Investigators documented these occurrences with audio recording devices, capturing faint sounds that could not be attributed to neighboring apartments or external noise. Objects moving on their own became increasingly common. Tenants reported small items of keys, dishes, and buxa shifting or falling without explanation. In more extreme cases, heavier objects such as chairs or suitcases were found displaced, sometimes in the middle of hallways or bedrooms. Witnesses described a sense of intentionality behind these movements, as if the objects were being guided by unseen hands. The unpredictability of these interactions created a heightened state of alert among residents, many of whom reported difficulty sleeping or feeling safe in their own homes. Shadowy figures were frequently reported in hallways, stairwells, and lobbies. Witnesses described them as vaguely human in shape, with indistinct features. Sometimes appearing to move fluidly through walls or corners. Security footage captured fleeting shapes in areas that were otherwise empty, confirming what residents had described. The figures seemed to avoid direct contact, appearing at the edge of vision, only to disappear when observed directly. Investigators noted that these apparitions often appeared in the same locations where objects had moved or voices had been heard, suggesting a correlation between visual and physical phenomena. Doors became another focal point of the haunting. Residents reported doors swinging open or shutting without any apparent cause. Security cameras corroborated these accounts, showing doors moving in otherwise locked and secure areas. Investigators ruled out drafts, mechanical failure, or human interference, concluding that the movements were consistent with intelligent activity. Some residents reported that certain doors seemed guarded by the presence, with the shadowy figures appearing nearby whenever someone approached, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Many residents also described the sensation of being followed as they walked through hallways or entered rooms. They reported a palpable feeling of unseen eyes tracking their movements. Some claimed to hear footsteps echoing behind them, only to find the hallways empty when they turned. The sense of being pursued extended to elevators, stairwells, and even private apartments, creating an environment in which everyday movements became tense and foreboding. Sightings of shadows or moving objects reinforced an impression of an intelligent interactive presence. Sudden cold spots appeared in specific areas, often correlating with visual sightings of shadowy figures. Cameras also captured faint silhouettes crossing hallways and disappearing through walls. These findings suggested that the apartment was not merely experiencing random anomalies, but was the site of consistent and active paranormal activity. The Baltimore apartment S history may offer insight into the haunting. Previous residents and events, including past disputes, accidents, or unexplained deaths, could have left residual energy within the building. Investigators speculated that the combination of history, human emotion, and architectural features, long hallways, enclosed stairwells, and reflective surfaces may have amplified the manifestations, creating an environment where spirits or energy imprints linger and interact with the living. Today, the Baltimore apartment stands as more than just a residential building. Shadowy figures roam the hallways, voices call out from empty rooms, objects move independently, doors open and close without cause, and tenants feel unseen presences following them. Security footage and investigative reports confirm that the phenomena are not mere imagination. For residents and investigators alike, the apartment is a place where the ordinary and the supernatural intersect, a space in which the living cannot escape the lingering influence of the unseen. For anyone walking its corridors at night, the Baltimore apartment is a reminder that some spaces retain the memories and energies of the past. For anyone walking its corridors at night, the Baltimore apartment is a reminder that some spaces retain the memories and energies of the past. Figures appear and vanish, whispers drift through the hallways, objects shift on their own, and doors move without explanation. It is a place where the boundary between the living and the spectral is fragile. The Washington, D.C. Museum stands as a grand repository of history, art, and culture, its halls lined with artifacts spanning centuries, and its galleries meticulously curated to transport visitors through time. By day, the museum is bustling with tourists, school groups, and scholars, all wandering through exhibits, observing relics, and absorbing the stories preserved within glass cases. By night, however, the building takes on a much different character, one that has left both staff and investigators unsettled. Detectives were called after repeated reports of strange occurrences during after-hours events and overnight security shifts. Witnesses described objects moving on their own, shadowy figures walking silently among exhibits, whispers drifting through empty rooms, and cold gusts of air appearing without explanation. Cameras captured flickering orbs moving independently through galleries, reinforcing the sense that the museum's alive with unseen activity. The first reports came from overnight security personnel. Officers patrolling the halls after closing hours described seeing figures gliding silently along corridors or standing near displays. The shapes were indistinct, sometimes fully formed human silhouettes, and at other times hazy forms that seemed to shift and shimmer. When approached, these figures would vanish instantly, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps or a lingering chill in the air. The experience was often accompanied by a feeling of being watched, creating an oppressive atmosphere that made even experienced security officers uneasy. Objects moving independently became a consistent and troubling phenomenon. Visitors and staff reported small items such as pens, papers, or display props shifting from their places, while heavier objects like chairs or light fixtures occasionally tilted or moved. At times, glass cases were found slightly ajar, despite being secured. Witnesses described the movements as purposeful, not random, suggesting that the entities were interacting with the museum's environment in a calculated manner. Investigators noted that these incidents often coincided with sightings of shadowy figures, whispers, or cold spots, linking the physical disturbances with paranormal presence. Whispers were a particularly eerie feature of the activity. Officers and staff reported hearing soft voices echoing through empty galleries, sometimes calling names, issuing instructions, or murmuring unintelligible phrases. The voices were clear but disembodied, appearing to emanate from walls, floors, or ceilings rather than from any human source. Some reported overhearing fragments of conversations between figures no one else could see. Investigators set up audio recording equipment and captured faint murmurs that matched witness accounts, confirming that the sounds were not merely imagined. The whispers often accompanied sightings of shadowy figures or moving objects, reinforcing the impression that the Muzuma-S activity was both intelligent and interactive. Cameras captured further evidence of unusual phenomena. Surveillance footage showed fleeting shadows crossing corridors and galleries, figures appearing in areas without any visible entrance or exit, and orbs of light flickering and moving independently. Long exposure photographs revealed streaks of luminescence near artifacts or atop display cases, often in patterns suggesting deliberate motion. Thermal imaging captured cold pockets that coincided with visual sightings and object movements, lending credibility to witness reports of sudden chills in otherwise temperature-controlled environments. Cold gusts of air were another hallmark of the haunting. Security personnel and investigators alike reported localized drops in temperature, often accompanied by a tangible sense of presence. Some described feeling a sudden brush of wind against their skin, even in sealed galleries, or a weight pressing down on their shoulders. The cold spots often coincided with areas where shadowy figures were reported or objects were moving, creating a cohesive pattern of activity that defied natural explanation. Exhibits themselves appear to interact with the paranormal activity. Witnesses reported displays being altered overnight, artifacts slightly shifted, paintings tilted, or objects missing from their positions only to return later. Shadowy figures were sometimes seen near these exhibits. As though inspecting them or performing unseen rituals, investigators speculated that the Muzuma-S long history and the emotional energy embedded in its artifacts may have contributed to the intensity of the phenomena. Certain areas, such as older exhibits or galleries housing items connected to tragic events, seemed to concentrate the activity. Those who experienced the phenomena described heightened anxiety, fear, and a constant feeling of being observed. Hallways that should have been silent and empty felt oppressive, and the interplay of whispers, moving objects, and shadowy figures created an environment that was both immersive and disorienting. Many officers reported leaving their shifts with lingering unease, feeling as if the museum continued to watch them even after they had exited. The Washington, D.C. Museum is more than a historical institution. It is a space where past and present, the living and the unseen, intersect. Shadowy figures glide through empty halls. Whispers echo across silent galleries. Objects move independently. Cold gusts chill the air, and cameras capture orbs of unexplained light. Witnesses consistently report that the phenomena are not random, but appear purposeful and interactive, suggesting an intelligence behind the manifestations. For anyone entering the museum after dark, it is not merely a building of artifacts and historia. It is a living space haunted by echoes of the past. Figures appear and vanish, whispers drift through the galleries, objects shift without explanation, and cold spots move unpredictably. Detectives, investigators, and witnesses leave with the inescapable sense that the museum is inhabited by unseen entities, a place where the boundaries between the living and the spectral are fragile, and where the weight of history manifests in ways both visible and invisible. The Pittsburgh Mansion in Pennsylvania stands as an imposing relic of the past, its sprawling halls, ornate woodwork, and grand staircases bearing witness to decades of history. By day, the mansion is admired for its architecture and antiques, a symbol of elegance and refinement. By night, however, the mansion transforms into a place of mystery and unease. Private investigators were called to property after repeated reports from residents and staff describing paranormal phenomena that defied explanation. Witnesses reported doors slamming violently on their own, furniture shifting or moving without human intervention, and shadowy figures appearing in multiple rooms. Cold spots formed unexpectedly, chilling the air, and apparitions often vanished when approached, leaving only an unsettling stillness in their wake. The first accounts came from night staff and caretakers who had spent years tending the mansion. They described hearing the sharp crack of doors slamming, sometimes in rooms at the opposite end of the hall, with no wind or mechanical cause to explain the motion. Furniture, including chairs, tables, and occasional dressers, was found displaced in ways that suggested deliberate movement rather than accidental tipping. Objects appeared to shift gradually over time, or in some cases, would move suddenly, startling those nearby. Witnesses often reported a distinct sensation of being observed, an invisible presence that seemed to follow them from room to room. Shadowy figures were a consistent phenomenon throughout the mansion. Residents and staff described dark silhouettes that flickered at the edge of vision, often standing near doorways or corners where light rarely reached. Some figures appeared vaguely human in shape, while others were more amorphous, almost as if formed from smoke or shadow. When approached, the figures would dissipate or vanish entirely, leaving behind a lingering coldness and an unsettling emptiness in the space they had occupied. Witnesses consistently reported that the apparitions seemed aware of their presence, creating a sense of interaction rather than random occurrence. Cold spots added another layer of discomfort. Certain rooms or corridors would suddenly drop in temperature, leaving visible breath in the air or an icy sensation on the skin. These cold areas often coincided with sightings of shadowy figures or moving furniture, suggesting a connection between the visual and physical manifestations. Investigators noted that the temperature changes were localized and appeared without explanation, unaffected by the Mansiona's heating system or external weather conditions. Investigators documented the activity using security cameras, audio recorders, and thermal imaging equipment. Footage captured doors opening and closing without contact, shadows moving along hallways, and faint silhouettes appearing near the grand staircase. Audio devices picked up whispers, footsteps, and the occasional metallic clatter of furniture shifting, all in spaces that were otherwise empty. Thermal imaging revealed sudden cold pockets that correlated with visual sightings, providing additional evidence of paranormal activity. The consistency of these occurrences across multiple nights suggested a persistent presence within the mansion rather than isolated incidents. Residents described the psychological effects of these manifestations. The sensation of being watched, combined with sudden noises, moving objects, and unexplained cold, created an environment of tension and unease. Hallways that should have been quiet and empty felt alive with unseen forces, and even routine tasks became anxiety-inducing. Witnesses reported difficulty sleeping, a heightened awareness of every sound and shadow, and a growing reluctance to move freely through the mansion after dark. Many noted that the activity seemed to escalate in intensity during late-night hours, when the house was quiet and human presence minimal. Furniture would tilt toward doors, tables would move slightly closer to walls, and other objects would be found in positions that seemed to indicate interaction with the residents or investigators. The sense of intentionality added to the feeling that the mansion was not merely haunted, but occupied by entities capable of influencing their environment. Doors were another focal point of the haunting. Slamming, creaking, and swinging motions occurred throughout the mansion, sometimes in rapid succession, sometimes slowly and deliberately. Investigators confirmed that the doors were properly latched and unaffected by drafts, ruling out ordinary causes. Some doors appear to open toward specific rooms, as if guiding or redirecting occupants, while others would close suddenly, blocking passage or startling those nearby. This behavior reinforced the sense of a responsive presence, interacting with those inside the mansion. Shadowy apparitions were reported in multiple rooms, including bedrooms, dining areas, and the grand hall. Witnesses described seeing figures standing silently near walls or hovering near windows, often only visible for a brief moment before disappearing. Investigators noted that these figures often appeared in areas where previous activity of object movement, cold spots, or door slams had been reported, suggesting a network of paranormal activity concentrated in specific parts of the mansion. The Pittsburgh Mansion is more than a historic home. It is a space where the past continues to interact with the present in ways that defy explanation. Shadowy figures glide through hallways, doors open and close without cause, furniture moves independently, and cold spots chill the air. Apparitions vanish when approached, leaving witnesses with a lingering impression of unseen observation. Security footage and investigative records confirm that the activity is consistent, interactive, and unmistakably present. For anyone walking at halls after dark, the Pittsburgh Mansion is a place where history and mystery converge. The doors slam, shadows flit across corridors, furniture shifts without explanation, and the air grows cold with the presence of the unseen. Investigators, staff, and residents alike leave with a sense that the mansion is alive in ways beyond comprehension. a place where the boundary between the living and the spectral is impossibly thin, and where unseen eyes watch every move. The Portland Church in Oregon is an imposing and historic structure, its tall spires and stained glass windows a testament to generations of worship and community gatherings. By day, it stands as a place of solace, reflection, and prayer, where sunlight filters through the colored glass, casting vibrant patterns across the pews and stone floors. By night, however, the church transforms into a place that inspires unease, where shadows seem to move independently, and the quiet is broken by unexplainable sounds. Detectives were called after multiple reports of paranormal activity within the church. Witnesses described voices echoing through empty halls, objects moving without explanation, and shadowy figures appearing near pews. Initial reports came from caretakers and evening visitors who were among the first to notice unusual occurrences. Staff described walking through silent corridors only to hear whispers echoing off stone walls, voices that seemed to come from nowhere yet carried the weight of intent. The whispers often called out names or issued fragmented phrases, making the listeners feel directly addressed. Some reported hearing multiple voices at once, as if conversations were taking place in rooms long abandoned. Investigators documented these auditory phenomena with recording devices, capturing faint murmurs and indistinct words that could not be attributed to nearby human activity. Objects in the church frequently moved on their own. Visitors reported hymnals sliding across pews, candles tilting or falling, and chairs shifting slightly as if nudged by invisible hands. Larger objects, including altars and statues, were occasionally found in positions slightly different from where they had been left, suggesting a deliberate rearrangement rather than accidental displacement. Witnesses often felt a sudden pressure or presence that the church was not just haunted, but actively responding to the living. Investigators noted that the activity often occurred in areas associated with historic events or older sections of the building, hinting at residual energy connected to past occupants or worshippers. Shadowy figures were reported in multiple parts of the church. Observers described vague human forms appearing near pews, hovering at the edges of corridors, or standing silently near altars. These shapes were often indistinct, shifting between solid and smoky appearances, and disappeared when approached. Witnesses consistently reported a sense of being watched, as though the figures were tracking movements with awareness. Some felt as though the entities were guiding or observing them, creating a psychological tension that intensified the physical manifestations. Investigators captured occasional glimpses of these figures on night vision cameras, confirming the presence of shadowy forms that were otherwise invisible to the naked eye. Cold spots added a tangible element to the haunting. Certain areas of the church would suddenly chill, causing visible breath and goosebumps even in otherwise temperate conditions. These cold pockets often appeared in tandem with sightings of shadow figures or the movement of objects. Investigators documented temperature fluctuations that could not be explained by drafts, HVAC systems, or external weather conditions, further supporting reports of an active, unseen presence. Visitors described these sudden drops in temperature as heavy, oppressive, and localized, adding to the overall sense of unease within the sacred space. Footsteps and echoing sounds were another recurring phenomenon. Witnesses reported hearing slow, deliberate steps following them through hallways, pews, or side chapels. Often, when they turned to confront the source, no one was there. Occasionally, the footsteps were accompanied by faint echoes of doors opening, fabric rustling, or soft metallic clinks, as if unseen figures were interacting with the environment. Audio recordings captured these sounds repeatedly, aligning with the times and locations reported by witnesses. The psychological impact on those experiencing the phenomena was significant. Residents, visitors, and staff alike described heightened anxiety, a sense of being constantly monitored, and an inability to ignore subtle sounds or movements. Even the simple act of walking down a hallway or entering a chapel became tense and unnerving. Witnesses reported that the activity seemed more pronounced at night, particularly in isolated areas of the building where ambient noise was minimal. The interplay of visual, auditory, and physical phenomena created an immersive and disorienting experience that was difficult to explain. Objects moved in response to human presence. Shadows appeared near observer paths. and whispers often address individuals directly. Investigators noted patterns in the occurrences that suggested intelligence behind the manifestations. The church has long history, including generations of worship, ceremonies, and perhaps even tragic events, may have left energetic imprints that manifested as these paranormal phenomena. Certain pews, corridors, and rooms appear to concentrate activity, drawing both visual and auditory manifestations in predictable ways. The Portland Church is more than a building of stone and glass. It is a space where the past and present converge, where the living and the unseen coexist in uneasy proximity. Shadowy figures glide near pews, voices echo through empty halls, objects move without cause, and cold spots chill the air. Visitors report being watched, footsteps follow where no one is present, and investigators capture evidence of activity that defies explanation. For anyone wandering its corridors after dark, the Portland Church is a place where the ordinary and the supernatural intersect. Shadows shift at the edge of vision, whispers drift through silent spaces, objects shift independently, and the air grows icy with presence. Detectives and witnesses leave with the inescapable impression that the church is alive with unseen activity, a place where the boundary between the living and the spectral is thin, and where the echoes of the past continue to assert themselves in the present. The Nashville Barn in Tennessee is an old, weathered structure tucked away on the outskirts of town. Its wooden beams are aged and creaking, the floors uneven from decades of wear. The faded paint and rusted metal accents give it a hauntingly rustic appearance. By night, however, it becomes a place of inexplicable activity, a setting where the ordinary laws of reality appear to bend. Investigators were called after multiple reports from locals and trespassers describing strange occurrences. Scratches mysteriously etched into the walls, objects shifting or falling without cause, shadowy figures lingering in corners, whispers calling out names, and lights flickering in ways that defied explanation. The first reports came from farmers and neighbors who had passed by the barn after dusk. They described a feeling of unease even from outside the building, as if the structure itself exuded a presence that watched and waited. Those who ventured inside reported hearing faint scratching noises echoing from the wooden walls, scratches that seemed too deliberate to be caused by animals or natural wear. Sometimes, the marks appeared freshly formed after a night's passage, as if the barn itself was etching messages into its surfaces. Investigators documented these scratches, noting their jagged, almost claw-like patterns and their sudden appearance without any plausible explanation. Objects moving independently became a frequent occurrence. Loose tools, buckets, hay bales, and even heavier wooden crates were reported to shift positions. Witnesses described items sliding across the floor, tipping over, or disappearing entirely from one spot. The activity seemed intelligent, sometimes aligning with the movements of observers, as if the entities were interacting directly with the people inside. Security cameras set up by investigators recorded objects moving, some in subtle shifts, others in sudden jolts, confirming that these incidents were not the result of wind, vibration, or human interference. Shadowy figures were seen by multiple witnesses, lingering in the corners or at the edges of vision. Some appeared humanoid, with indistinct features and a dark, smoky appearance, while others seemed more amorphous, as if the shadows themselves had taken shape to observe the living. When approached, these figures would vanish instantly, leaving behind only a chilling stillness and a sense of unseen eyes tracking every movement. Witnesses often described the figures as unervingly aware, almost sentient, appearing in patterns that suggested they were intentionally present. Whispers were another hallmark of a Nashville barn. Visitors reported hearing their names being called softly, sometimes multiple times, echoing through the empty space. Sometimes multiple times, echoing through the empty space. The voices seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, drifting along the rafters behind doors or near the corners of rooms. At times, the whispers would form fragmented phrases, sometimes warnings, other times incomprehensible utterances that seemed laden with emotion. Investigators recorded these sounds, and playback revealed murmurs and calls that could not be attributed to background noise or human voices. lights flickering in impossible ways added to the unnerving environment. Bulbs would dim and brighten on their own. Shadows cast by illumination would shift without movement. And entire areas of the barn would briefly glow or darken inexplicably. Witnesses described the lights as responding to their presence, sometimes flickering when they entered a specific area or along certain pathways. Cameras corroborated these reports, capturing abrupt changes in lighting that occurred even in the absence of power fluctuations or electrical anomalies. Physical sensations accompanied many of these phenomena. Witnesses frequently reported sudden cold spots that seemed to sweep across the barn, chilling the air and raising goosebumps on exposed skin. Some felt a weight pressing down on their shoulders or an invisible presence brushing past them as they moved through the building. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile experiences created a sense that the barn was actively alive, responding to and interacting with those inside. Investigators noted patterns in the paranormal activity. Corners of the barn were particularly active, often where shadowy figures were reported or where objects were seen moving. The scratches on walls appeared concentrated near certain support beams, suggesting locations of residual energy or focus. Whispers frequently emanated from darkened corners behind crates or near areas where visitors reported seeing figures vanish. The consistency of these events over multiple nights pointed to a persistent presence rather than sporadic or coincidental activity. The Nashville barn is more than just an abandoned agricultural building. It is a space where unseen forces manifest with tangible effects. Objects move, shadows linger, scratches appear on walls. Whispers call out names, and lights flicker without explanation. Witnesses report the overwhelming sensation of being observed. And investigators have confirmed evidence through cameras, audio recordings, and first-hand documentation. The barn-esque atmosphere is one of deliberate, interactive haunting, where the boundary between the living and unseen is fragile and easily crossed. For those entering the Nashville barn after dark, every step is fraught with tension. Shadows fling corners, objects shift without cause, whispers echo through the rafters, scratches mar the walls, and lights flicker unpredictably. Investigators, locals, and visitors alike leave with the undeniable impression that the barn is alive in ways that defy logic, a place where unseen eyes follow every movement, and where the echoes of the past continue to assert their presence with an unrelenting intensity. Detectives face danger every day, but some threats cannot be solved by logic, evidence, or training. These 25 paranormal investigations remind us